Everything has a price. You just haven't heard the right number yet. That was what he said to her face, standing in her dead father's garage in her dead father's town with his expensive suit and his cold smile and his checkbook already open. Emily Walker looked at him the way her father had taught her to look at men who thought money was the same thing as power. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She just said two words. Get out. If this story hits you somewhere deep, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop your in the comments below and let me know how far this story has traveled. Now let's go. The morning Richard Blackwell walked into Walker's classic garage, Emily was already 3 hours into her day. She had been up since 4:30, which was nothing unusual for her. The alarm on her phone set for 4:15, but she never needed it. Her body had learned years ago that sleep was a privilege, not a guarantee, not when there were invoices to reconcile and engines to diagnose, and customers who needed their trucks back before their shifts started at 6. She was lying in the dark before the alarm ever sounded, staring at the ceiling, the way she always did, running through the day in her mind like a checklist. She couldn't stop writing. Get up, start the coffee, walk the floor, check the lifts, check the compressor lines, review the day's work orders. Make sure Marcus, her part-time assistant, hadn't forgotten to order the brake rotors she needed for the Henderson Silverado. By the time the sun came up over the mountains east of Red Valley, Emily Walker was already flat on her back underneath a 1969 Ford Mustang, a flashlight clenched between her teeth, her hands deep inside the exhaust system listening. That was the thing people never understood about mechanics, the good ones anyway. You didn't just fix a car with your hands. You listened to it. You learned its rhythms. You paid attention to what it was telling you before it broke down entirely and started telling you in the worst possible way. Her father had taught her that. Thomas Walker had been teaching her things since she was old enough to hold a wrench, which according to family legend was somewhere around age 4. There were photographs in the back office, old ones, faded at the edges, from years of sitting in frames that never moved, of a tiny blonde girl standing on a step stool beside a massive engine block. Her face completely serious, like the fate of the world depended on whether she torqued that bolt to the right specification. She still had that expression. People told her that sometimes, that she looked at a problem the same way she probably looked at everything, like it was something to be solved, not surrendered to. Thomas Walker had not been a rich man. He had not been a famous man. He had been a mechanic in a small Montana town for 37 years. And when he built Walker's classic garage with his own hands in 1981, he did it on borrowed money and borrowed time, and a stubbornness that his wife said would either save him or kill him. As it turned out, it did a little of both. The garage became the kind of place that people in Red Valley talked about the way you talk about a family member. Not always perfectly, not always with reverence, but with a bone-deep familiarity that meant something. Thomas fixed farm trucks at 3 in the morning when a harvest was on the line. He let veterans run tabs when the VA checks were late. He hired kids who nobody else would hire, taught them the trade, and sent them out into the world better than he found them. I didn't make a fortune, but he made something rarer. He made a reputation. And when cancer took him 18 months before the story really begins quietly, the way Thomas Walker did everything without making a fuss or asking for anything he didn't think was fair. He left his daughter 2 things. He left her the garage, and he left her everything he had ever tried to teach her about what it meant to be the kind of person who could run it. Emily was 34 years old when she buried her father. She had been working beside him since her 20s, having come back to Red Valley after 2 years at a technical college in Billings, where she earned her certifications and discovered with a certainty that surprised even her that she didn't want to be anywhere else. She didn't want the city. She didn't want the corporate job. She wanted the garage. She wanted to keep doing what he did. And for 3 years after his death, that's exactly what she did. She ran the garage the way Thomas had run it, fairly honestly, with her hands in the work every single day. She expanded the specialty restoration side of the business, which had always been Thomas's quiet passion. The cars he loved for their own sake rather than for the money they might generate. She took on apprentices. She held the line on pricing because her father had believed that a mechanic who overcharged was a mechanic who broke trust, and broken trust was the one thing you could never put back together, no matter how skilled your hands were. The garage didn't make her rich, but it kept the lights on. It kept the community trust that Thomas had built over 4 decades. It kept her father's name alive in the place where it had always meant something. And that was enough. Until the morning Richard Blackwell walked through the door. She heard him before she saw him. She was still under the Mustang when she heard the sound of expensive shoes on concrete, not boots, not sneakers, not the worn-down work shoes of a man who spent time on his feet for a living. These were dress shoes, leather-soled, the kind that made a particular sound on the garage floor that said very clearly, "I don't belong here, and I know it, and I don't particularly care." She rolled out from under the car on her creeper board and looked up. I was standing in the middle of the garage bay, with his hands clasped behind his back, looking around the way. A man looks at something he's already decided to buy, not with curiosity, but with inventory, taking stock, measuring the space in some internal calculation that had nothing to do with what the space actually was or what it meant. I was maybe 55, silver-haired, with the kind of fitness that came from expensive gym memberships rather than actual labor. His suit was dark gray, perfectly pressed with a pocket square that Emily thought cost more than her monthly electricity bill. He had a face that was handsome in a polished way, the kind of handsome that was designed to put people at ease before they realized they were being managed. Emily stood up. She pulled the rag from her back pocket and started cleaning her hands, watching him. He turned when he heard her, and he smiled. It was a very good smile. She could tell he had practiced it. "Emily Walker," he said. "Depends on who's asking." The smile didn't waver. "My name is Richard Blackwell. I'm a developer. I work primarily in commercial real estate acquisition and development. I've been looking at several properties in Red Valley as part of a larger project I'm undertaking in this area." He paused, looking around again. "This is a wonderful space. Really wonderful. Your father built this." "My father built everything here," Emily said. Her voice was even, careful. "I can see that. I can feel it, actually." He turned back to her, and for a moment, something in his expression shifted into what she supposed he thought was sincerity. "I was sorry to hear about his passing. Thomas Walker had a remarkable reputation in this community." "He did, which is actually part of what I wanted to talk to you about." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a business card which he held out toward her. "I'd like to make you an offer on this property, Ms. Walker, a very serious offer, one I think you'll find compelling." Emily looked at the card. She didn't take it. "The garage isn't for sale," she said. He held the card out for another second, then withdrew it smoothly, like a card trick, going the other direction. He tucked it back into his pocket without any visible change in his composure. "I understand this might come as a surprise," he said, "and I don't want to pressure you. That's not my style. I just want to make sure you have all the information you need to make an informed decision." "I have all the information I need," Emily said. "The garage isn't for sale, Ms. Walker." He took a single step toward her, not aggressive, just close enough to make the conversation feel more intimate than she wanted it to be. "I'm authorized to offer you significantly above current market value. We're talking about enough money to set you up very comfortably for the rest of your life. You could open a new facility somewhere larger, somewhere with better access." "Mr. Blackwell," she said his name quietly without heat, but with a flatness that stopped him mid-sentence. "My father built this garage on this land. My father is buried 3 miles from here. I grew up in this building. I'm going to die an old woman in this building." She held his gaze. "The garage is not for sale, not for any number." Something moved behind his eyes, just briefly. Something that wasn't quite anger, it was colder than anger. It was the look of a man who had heard no before and had a methodology for turning it into yes that he was already beginning to run through in his mind. But he smiled, he nodded. "I respect that," he said. "I do. Family is everything." He began walking back toward the door unhurried. "I'll leave you my information in case you change your mind." He set the card on the edge of the workbench without looking at it. "I have a feeling we'll be talking again, Ms. Walker." "I doubt it," she said. He paused at the door, looked back over his shoulder with that practiced smile. "Everything has a price," he said. "You just haven't heard the right number yet." Then he was gone. Emily stood there for a long moment, staring at the business card on her workbench. Then she went back under the Mustang. She had work to do. She didn't tell anyone about the visit at first. That was probably her first mistake. Though looking back later, she wasn't sure it would have mattered. There weren't a lot of people to tell, for one thing. Marcus was 22 and earnest and wonderful with engines, but not particularly useful in a crisis of the business variety. Her friend Donna, who ran the hardware store 2 blocks down, would have listened and sympathized but had her own problems. And the people Emily might have called for real counsel, her father most significantly, were not available anymore. So she filed the visit away in the back of her mind, the way she filed uncomfortable things carefully in a place where she could see it but didn't have to look at it directly. She went back to work. 3 days later, she got the first phone call. It was from Auto Parts Supply Co. out of Billings, a supplier she had worked with for 4 years reliably without a single major issue. The man on the phone told her in a tone that was apologetic but also somehow practiced that there was going to be a delay on her next parts order. Supply chain issues, he said. She would understand. She understood. These things happen. But 2 days after that, her order from a second supplier, a different company entirely, one in Great Falls, was also delayed. Different reason, a warehouse inventory issue that was being sorted out. Her parts would come, they just couldn't say exactly when. She started making calls. She had restoration work in progress on 2 vehicles whose owners needed timeline estimates. She needed to know when she could expect the components that would let her finish the jobs. She got vague answers. She got apologetic voices. She got a lot of "we're doing our best," and "we appreciate your patience," and nothing else. She told herself it was a coincidence. She almost believed it. The first customer cancellation came the following Tuesday. Pete Garrison was a farmer who had been bringing his vehicles to Walker's since Thomas was running the place. He called Emily himself, which she appreciated, and he sounded genuinely uncomfortable on the phone. "Emily, I hate to do this," he said. "You know I do, but I heard some things, and I need to ask you straight, is the garage having financial trouble?" Emily frowned. "No, Pete, where did you hear that?" "Around, people talking. Someone told Ed Larson that you might be closing up, and Ed mentioned it at the co-op, and you know how things get." He paused. "I'm not trying to make trouble. I just can't take a chance right now with everything I've got running. You understand?" "I understand," she said, though her voice had gone very quiet. "But Pete, none of that is true. The garage is fine." "I believe you," he said. "And then I'm still going to take the truck to Red Valley Auto for now, just until things settle. I'm sorry, Emily." She stood there after she hung up, looking at the phone in her hand. Things settle. What things? She called Marcus into the office and asked him if he'd heard anything in town. He looked uncomfortable immediately, which told her something. "Just some talk," he said. "What kind of talk?" He shifted his weight. He was a kid who hated conflict the way some people hated heights, a physical, visceral aversion that showed in every line of his body. "People saying the garage is having trouble, that you might have to sell. Some people saying you're not keeping up with the loan payments." He looked at her quickly. "Nobody believes it who really knows you, Emily." "Who's saying it?" "That's the thing," he said slowly. "I can't figure out who started it. It's just around, like it came from everywhere at once." Emily sat down. Very carefully, very deliberately, she sat down in her father's chair behind her father's desk, and she looked at the wall where his old certifications still hung in their frames, and she breathed. She thought about Richard Blackwell's smile. She thought about what he had said on his way out the door. And she understood with a clarity that felt like cold water that the war had already started. She just hadn't known she was in it. Over the next 2 weeks, she counted 4 more cancellations. Not all of them called. 2 just didn't show up for scheduled appointments, and when she called them, she got voicemails and no callbacks. One woman, Linda Marsh, who had been a friend of her mother's and had brought her Subaru to Thomas for 15 years, sent a text that said, "Only sorry, Emily, hope things work out." Things. There was that word again. Emily started keeping a notebook. She wrote down everything, every cancellation, every delayed parts shipment, every piece of gossip that Marcus brought her from town, every small thing that felt slightly wrong in a way she couldn't quite name. She wrote dates and names and amounts the way her father had taught her to document everything in a business, because documentation was the difference between a suspicion and a fact. The list grew faster than she wanted it to. She also called her bank. She had accounts at Red Valley Community Bank, had always banked there. Her father had always banked there. It was the kind of local institution that had been part of the community fabric for as long as she could remember. She called because she wanted to confirm her loan payment had gone through as usual. The woman at the bank sounded strange on the phone. Not unfriendly, but careful. She told Emily that there had been a flag on her account, nothing serious, probably just a routine audit, but that someone from compliance would be in touch. What kind of flag? Emily asked. I can't give you more information than that over the phone, Ms. Walker. Someone will reach out. Nobody reached out that day, or the next. Emily went to the bank in person on a Thursday morning. She sat down with the branch manager, a man named Gerald Hoffman, who had known her father and who could not quite look her in the eye. Gerald, she said, what's going on? He shuffled papers. He adjusted his glasses. It's just a routine review, Emily. I want you to know that. Nobody's saying anything definitive. Someone filed a complaint, she said, not a question. He stopped shuffling papers. Someone filed a complaint about my account, she said again quietly. Alleging what? I can't go into the specifics. Gerald. She said his name the same way she had said Blackwell's name in the garage flat, careful with a weight behind it. My father did business with this bank for 35 years. I have done business with this bank for 3 years. There has never been a single late payment, a single overdraft, a single irregularity of any kind. And now someone has flagged my account. Who filed the complaint? Gerald Hoffman looked at the wall to her right. He said very carefully, I can't share that information, Emily, but I want to be clear that we are handling this appropriately. And is it Richard Blackwell? The silence that followed lasted maybe 2 seconds. But in those 2 seconds, Emily watched Gerald Hoffman's face do something involuntary, a small tightening around the eyes, a barely perceptible movement of his jaw, and she had her answer. She stood up. Thank you, Gerald, she said. I'll be in touch. She walked out of the bank into the cold Montana morning with her hands steady at her sides and her mind running very fast. She wasn't afraid. She wanted to be precise about that, at least to herself. She wasn't afraid, not exactly. What she felt was something more like the feeling you get when you realize that the problem you've been looking at is much larger than it first appeared, and the edges of it extend into territory you haven't mapped yet. She called her lawyer that afternoon. His name was Daniel Park, and he worked out of a small office in Billings. She had used him for the paperwork when she formally took over the business after Thomas died. He was thorough and quiet and didn't say things he wasn't certain about, which Emily appreciated deeply. She told him everything. The visit from Blackwell, the supplier delays, the cancellations, the bank visit, the rumors. Daniel Park listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Emily, he said, I want to be careful here because I can't prove anything. But what you're describing, the coordinated disruption of your supply chain, the rumors engineered to hurt your business or reputation, the regulatory complaint filed against your banking relationship, these are not coincidences. This is a pattern. I know it's a pattern, she said. What can I do about it? That depends on how much of it we can document. Right now, we're working with circumstantial evidence and timing. For any of this to go anywhere legally, we need to connect Blackwell to the specific actions. He paused. This kind of thing it's designed to be hard to trace, Emily. The people who do it are experienced. They know how to make it look like a series of unrelated events. So what do I do? You keep the garage open, he said immediately. Whatever you do, you keep it open, because the moment you show any sign of vulnerability, any hesitation, it accelerates. That's how it works. They're waiting for you to blink. She thought about her father, about the times the business had been difficult, and she had watched him sit in that back office, going over the books with a flashlight in his hand at midnight, looking for the answer, never once talking about giving up. I won't blink, she said. Good, Daniel said. Then start documenting everything. Every supplier call, every cancellation, every interaction. Create a paper trail. I already started, she said. He made a small sound that might have been relief. Good. And Emily, be careful who you talk to in Red Valley. If Blackwell has reach in that community, and it sounds like he might, then you don't know yet who's listening. She hung up the phone and sat for a long time in the back office in her father's chair in the silence. Then she got up, walked back out into the garage, and picked up a wrench. The Mustang needed finishing. The Henderson Silverado needed brake rotors that she was still waiting on. A man named Bill Courtney had dropped off a 1957 Chevy Bel Air last week that he wanted restored to show condition, her favorite kind of work, the kind that connected her to history, to craftsmanship, to the reason she had gotten into this business in the first place. She worked until 11 that night. She went home, slept 4 hours, and came back at 4:30. She repeated this every day for the next 2 weeks. On the surface, nothing changed. The garage opened. The work got done. Emily Walker showed up every morning before the sun did and stayed until the work ran out. But underneath the surface, the pressure was building. 2 more customers didn't come back. A local business publication, a small regional newsletter that covered commerce in the Billings area, ran a brief item about financial instability at several small businesses in western Montana, and Walker's Classic Garage was named. Emily didn't know how to find out who had planted that item. She suspected she would never know. Her parts situation improved slightly. One supplier came through with a partial order, but the delays continued to ripple through her scheduling. She had 3 restoration projects backed up that she couldn't complete because she was waiting on components that should have arrived weeks ago. And then there was the thing with the insurance. She got a letter from her business insurance carrier informing her that her policy was being reviewed. A routine evaluation, the letter said. Standard practice. Her rates might be adjusted based on the outcome. She called them. She talked to 4 different people over 2 days, each of whom told her they couldn't discuss specifics, but that she would be notified of any changes. She pulled out her notebook and added the insurance review to the list. She called Daniel Park again. He's good at this, Daniel said, and his voice was grim. Whoever is working with him, because someone with this kind of reach doesn't do it alone. They know exactly how much pressure to apply to stay below the threshold that would constitute actionable harassment. Each individual incident is explainable. Together, they're a siege. But proving a siege in court is very difficult. How does someone fight a siege? Emily asked. Usually, Daniel said slowly, you need someone on the outside, someone who can come at it from an angle they don't expect. Emily didn't know what that meant yet. She filed it away. She went back to work. The night of the break-in was 3 weeks and 4 days after Richard Blackwell had smiled at her and set his business card on her workbench. She had stayed late that night working on the Bel Air. It was past midnight when she finally decided to stop her back aching and her hands raw from the cold that crept in under the garage doors, no matter how many times she tried to seal them out. She locked up, climbed into her truck, and drove home. She was gone, maybe 45 minutes, maybe less. When she drove back in the morning, she came back early because she'd left a tool she needed on the workbench and couldn't stop thinking about it. She knew something was wrong before she even got out of the truck. The side door was open, not broken down, not forced dramatically, just open. The lock had been defeated quietly, professionally by someone who knew what they were doing. She sat in the truck for a long moment. Then she called 911. Then she sat and waited without going inside because she had seen enough crime procedural television to know that you didn't contaminate a scene. But she could see through the open door, and what she saw reached into her chest and twisted something that had no name. The diagnostic equipment her father had saved for 3 years to buy, destroyed. The tool chest that had been his before it was hers, the one she had watched him build over decades, adding pieces carefully, proudly, one at a time, opened and emptied, and its drawers pulled out and bent. The restoration work on the Bel Air had been accessed, nothing stolen but panels loosened work, undone hours of careful labor reversed in minutes by someone who wasn't trying to steal anything. They were sending a message. She understood that clearly. Sell the garage or lose everything. Deputy Ray Torres was first on scene. He was a young guy, earnest, thorough. He took the report carefully and told her that they would investigate. When he asked if she had any idea who might be responsible, she told him all of it, the whole story from Richard Blackwell's initial visit to the bank, complaint to the insurance review. Torres wrote everything down. His expression shifted as she talked, going from the practiced neutral of a law enforcement officer, taking a statement to something more personal, something troubled. Emily, he said when she finished, this is serious. What you're describing is coordinated criminal harassment. I know. I'm going to bring this to Detective Mitchell. He handles more complex cases. I think he needs to hear this. I appreciate that. She walked back into the garage after Torres left and stood in the middle of the destruction. The diagnostic machine, the tool chest, her father's tool chest. She stood there and she looked at it, really looked at it. The bent drawers, the scratches where someone had pried it open carelessly, the way you treated something when it had no value to you. Her father had a name engraved on the inside of the top drawer. She had found it years ago as a little girl exploring the garage on a Sunday when it was quiet. In small, careful letters scratched into the metal with something sharp, Thomas Walker. Red Valley MT, built with honest hands. She walked over. She looked at the top drawer bent almost completely off its track. She grabbed it with both hands and straightened it as much as she could. The engraving was still there. She put her thumb over the letters, felt them under her skin, and she made a decision that was so quiet and so complete that it wasn't really a decision at all. It was more like a recognition, the understanding of something that had been true all along. She was not leaving. She was not selling. She was not going to blink. Not for Richard Blackwell. Not for his lawyers. Not for whoever had done this to her father's things in the dark. She was going to fight. She just needed to figure out how. She didn't know it yet, but the answer was already on its way. 3 days after the break-in on a cold Thursday morning, when the sky over Red Valley had gone the color of ash and the temperature had dropped hard overnight, Emily was opening the garage alone. She heard it before she saw it, the distinctive sound of a motorcycle engine. Not the buzzy, aggressive sound of a sport bike, but the deep, unhurried rumble of an American machine built for distance rather than speed. It was the sound of something that had been running for a long time and had learned to run well. She looked up from the door she was unlocking. The motorcycle came to a stop in the parking area in front of the garage. It was a beautiful machine, an older Harley-Davidson, well-maintained, with the kind of presence that came from decades of care rather than recent restoration. The rider cut the engine and sat for a moment in the sudden quiet. Then he swung off the bike. I was an older man, mid-60s, maybe hard to say exactly. Silver hair cut close, a weathered face that had been shaped by outdoor living, and years of what Emily could only think of as serious experience, the kind of face that didn't perform anything. A worn leather vest over a heavy flannel, the vest covered in patches. She could read a few of them from where she stood. He walked toward her without hurrying. He moved the way men move when they have stopped needing to prove anything. Morning, he said. His voice was low, unhurried, with a slight roughness that came from years rather than illness. Morning, Emily said. Is Walker's classic garage? It is. He nodded, looked at the building for a moment with an expression she couldn't quite read. I've got an old Indian Scout that's been giving me trouble on long runs. Electrical issue keeps cutting out around 60 miles in. I was told you do honest work. We do, Emily said. He looked back at her. You Thomas Walker's daughter. She stood a little straighter. I am. Something moved across his face. It was brief and complex, and it wasn't pity, she was very sure of that. It was something else. Recognition, maybe. The look of a person encountering a piece of information they already knew, but were meeting for the first time in person. Name's Jack, he said. He held out his hand. She shook it. His grip was firm and complete in the handshake of someone who had decided long ago that how you shook a person's hand said something real about you. Emily Walker, she said. I know, he said. Bring the Scout by any time. We'll figure it out together. She looked at him for a moment. Then bring it in now if you want. I've got time. He looked at her. Something in his expression shifted, not to a smile exactly, but to something in that direction, something that acknowledged a small and genuine connection. All right, he said. Then let's get started. She pulled up the garage door, and he walked his Scout inside, and in that moment, though neither of them would have been able to articulate it, something shifted. Something that had been moving in one direction began very slowly to turn. Emily Walker had been fighting alone. She just didn't know yet that she wasn't alone anymore. The Scout had an intermittent fault in its ignition circuit, a wire that had chafed against the frame over years of vibration until the insulation was thin enough to drop the connection under load. It was the kind of electrical problem that was maddening to diagnose because it didn't show up on a static test. You had to understand how the bike behaved in motion, had to think through the physics of the issue, had to know where to look. Emily found it in 40 minutes. Jack stood to the side and watched her work. He didn't hover or make suggestions or ask unnecessary questions. He simply watched with the attentiveness of a person who understood what skilled work looked like and had respect for it. When she found the fault and showed it to him, he looked at it carefully, asked 2 precise questions about how she intended to repair it, rather than simply rerouting it, and nodded when she explained her reasoning. Your father taught you that, he said. It wasn't a question. Most of what I know, she said. She was stripping the damaged insulation here, hand steady. Did you know him well? We met once, Jack said. About 25 years ago. She glanced up. I came through Red Valley on a long run, he said. Bike broke down 30 miles out. I managed to limp it here. Your father was the one who fixed it. He looked around the garage, taking it in slowly the way someone takes in a place that exists in their memory. He stayed late to do it. Wouldn't let me pay the emergency rate. Said he charged one price for the work, not one price for the hour. A pause. There weren't many mechanics like that. There aren't, Emily said softly. He talked about you, Jack said. She stopped working for just a moment, then resumed. He did. Said he had a daughter who was going to run the place better than he ever had. Said she had the hands for it and the head for it, and most importantly, the character for it. Said character was the part you couldn't teach. He looked at her directly. He seemed like a man who knew what he was talking about. Emily didn't say anything for a moment. She finished the repair with careful, precise movements, then tested the connection carefully. You want me to take it for a circuit on the county road, she asked. See if it holds past the 60-mile point. I'd trust your judgment, he said. She looked up at him again. There was something in his manner, in the stillness of him, in the way he occupied space without intruding on it, that she found herself paying attention to in a way she couldn't entirely explain. Mr. Callahan, she said. Jack. She set down her tools. Can I ask you something direct? I'd prefer it. Are you just a man who needs his motorcycle fixed? The silence that followed lasted maybe 4 seconds. Then Jack looked at her with an expression that was completely honest. No performance in it, no deflection. I heard you were having trouble, he said simply. From who? People talk, he said. Word travels. I know people in this part of Montana, and I've been knowing them for a long time. He paused. Your father helped me when nobody else would, and I've been carrying that for 25 years. When I heard Thomas Walker's daughter was fighting something she shouldn't have to fight alone, it seemed like time to stop carrying it. Emily was quiet for a long moment. She looked at him, really looked at him the way she looked at an engine when she was trying to understand what it was telling her. What are you going to do? She asked. Right now, he said, I'm going to let you fix my motorcycle, and then we're going to talk. He met her eyes. And then we're going to figure out what needs to happen next. She held his gaze for another moment, then she picked up her tools. All right, she said. Outside the garage, the cold Montana wind was coming down off the mountains the way it always did, the way it had always done, indifferent and steady. Inside, Emily Walker bent over an old Indian Scout and repaired what was broken the way her father had taught her to do. She didn't know yet what Jack Callahan was. She didn't know what connections he carried or what his presence was going to mean. She just knew with the instinct that her father had spent a lifetime teaching her that some things that looked like coincidence were not coincidence at all. Some things arrived exactly when they were supposed to. She charged Jack a fair price for the repair, not a favor price, not an inflated price. The same price she would have charged anyone. He paid it without comment and with what she recognized as genuine approval. Before he left, he stood in the doorway of the garage and looked back at her. The men who did this to your father's place, he said. Not a question. She waited. They think they can wear you down, he said. They think that's what this is about, endurance. Who can hold on longer? He paused. They're wrong about what this is about. What is it about? She said. He looked at her steadily. It's about who's standing when the truth comes out, he said. And truth always comes out, always has. He put his hand on the doorframe. You keep the garage open. You keep working. You don't change what you are or how you work because of what they're doing. That's the only thing they can't fight. She looked at him. Why can't they fight it? Because they don't understand it, he said simply. People like that. They understand money and pressure and leverage. They don't understand that there are things worth holding on to that can't be bought or pressured or leveraged. He held her gaze. Your father understood that. And I think you do too. He walked out. She stood listening to the sound of the Indian Scout starting up, idling, settling into its deep and even rhythm, pulling out of the parking lot and onto the road. She stood there until she couldn't hear it anymore. Then she took a breath. She pulled out her notebook. She opened it to a fresh page, and she wrote at the top in her careful mechanic's handwriting, what needs to happen next. She stared at those words for a long time. Then she started writing. The notebook sat open on Emily's kitchen table that night, with 12 lines written on it, and none of them were good enough. She had written down names, suppliers, customers, the bank, the insurance carrier, and beside each name she had written what she knew and what she suspected and what she could prove, and the column marked can prove was almost entirely empty. That was the problem. That had always been the problem. Richard Blackwell was not a stupid man. He had not called her suppliers himself. He had not walked into her bank and filed a complaint with his own signature on it. He had not driven to her garage in the middle of the night and destroyed her father's tool chest with his own hands. He had not done any of those things directly, which meant that everything Emily knew pointed in his direction, but nothing she had would hold up in a room where it actually mattered. She closed the notebook. She made herself eat something toast because it was the only thing she could face. And then she sat at the table and thought about what Jack Callahan had said. They don't understand that there are things worth holding on to that can't be bought or pressured or leveraged. She thought about that for a long time. Then she got up, washed her one dish, and went to bed. She slept exactly 3 hours and 40 minutes. She was back at the garage by 4:15. The first thing she did when she unlocked the door was go to her father's tool chest and open the top drawer. The metal was still bent from where someone had forced it, and she had to use both hands to get it all the way open. But the engraving was there, the same as it had always been, the same as it had been since Thomas Walker scratched those letters into the metal with a nail on a Sunday afternoon sometime in 1987, according to the story her mother had told once. Thomas Walker, Red Valley MT, built with honest hands. She ran her thumb over it, same as she had 2 days ago, standing in the wreckage. Then she closed the drawer and got to work. She was under the Henderson Silverado 40 minutes later, finally working with the brake rotors that had arrived the previous afternoon only 8 days late, which she supposed qualified as a small victory when she heard footsteps on the garage floor. Not dress shoes this time, work boots. She rolled out on the creeper board and looked up. Detective Ryan Mitchell was standing there holding 2 cups of coffee. He was 40-something with a steady face and the kind of unhurried manner that Emily had learned to recognize as the product of years spent in rooms where people were lying to him. He held out one of the cups without speaking. She took it, sat up. "You're here early." "So are you," he said. He looked at the tool chest, at the damage that was still visible, even after she had done what she could to fix the drawers. "Deputy Torres gave me your full statement. I wanted to come in person before things started moving this morning." "What things?" Oh, he sat down on the rolling stool she kept near the workbench, sat on it carefully like he was trying not to assume he was welcome. She appreciated that. "I spent yesterday afternoon making some calls," he said, "about Richard Blackwell." She held the coffee cup in both hands and waited. "He's done this before," Mitchell said. "Not here. Different county couple of years back. Small hardware business outside of Whitefish family owned, been there 30 years. The owner didn't want to sell, and then over the course of about 4 months, the business just fell apart. Supplier problems, reputation rumors, a regulatory issue with the county. Owner ended up selling at 30% below the first offer Blackwell made because by the time it was over, he didn't have any other choice." Emily was very still. "Did anyone prove anything?" "No," Mitchell said. "Nobody could. The owner knew what had happened, and I talked to him yesterday, and he knows it still, but there was never anything clean enough to take to a prosecutor." He looked at her directly. "Which is why I want to talk to you about how you want to handle this. Because if we try to go at Blackwell with what we have right now, we lose. We know that going in. So what do? We build it," he said. "We build it carefully and we don't rush, and we document everything you have and everything I can legally find. And we wait for him to make a mistake because people like this, they always make a mistake eventually. They get comfortable. They think they've already won." He paused. "The question is whether you can hold on long enough." She looked at him over the coffee cup. "How long are we talking?" "I can't give you a number." "Give me a range." I was quiet for a moment. "Weeks, maybe months." She absorbed that. "And in the meantime, he keeps doing what he's doing." "Probably, yes." She set the coffee cup down. She picked up her wrench. "Then I'd better not waste time." Mitchell watched her go back under the truck. He sat on the stool for another moment. "Emily," he said. She paused. "I want you to understand this kind of campaign, what he's running against you. It's designed to make you feel like you're alone, like nobody's paying attention. That's part of how it works." He paused again. "You're not alone. I want you to know that." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then from under the truck, "Thank you, detective." "Ryan," he said. "Call me Ryan." She heard him stand. She heard his footsteps cross the garage floor toward the door. "Ryan," she called. He stopped. "The hardware store owner in Whitefish," she said. "What was his name?" "A beat." "Gerald Ferris." "Does he still live there?" "Far as I know." "I want to talk to him," she said. She heard something that might have been a surprised exhale. Then, "I'll see if I can get you a number." His footsteps continued out the door. She went back to the brakes. She did not under any circumstances allow herself to feel afraid. That was not a feeling she could afford right now. Gerald Ferris answered the phone on the second ring, which surprised her. She had expected to get voicemail, to have to leave a message and wait and wonder if he would call back. But he answered, and when she told him who she was and why she was calling, there was a silence that lasted long enough to tell her everything. "He's doing it to you now," Gerald said, not a question. "Yes," she said. Another silence. "How far along is he?" "Supplier delays, customer cancellations, reputation rumors, bank flag on my account, business insurance review, and someone broke into my garage 2 nights ago and destroyed equipment." She heard him breathe. "He's moving faster with you than he did with me," he said, and there was something in his voice that was part warning and part sorrow, in part the specific kind of anger that lives in a person for years after they've lost something they can't get back. "With me, it was 6 months before the break-in." "Why do you think he's moving faster?" "Because you said no faster," Gerald said simply. "He doesn't like that. When I turned down the first offer, I was polite about it. I said I needed time to think. I didn't say no clearly." "You said no clearly, didn't you?" "It wasn't a question." "First conversation," Emily said. "I told him the garage wasn't for sale." "That's why," Gerald said. "He takes it personally. I know that sounds ridiculous for a man like him. He makes these deals all the time. Business is business. None of it should be personal, but it is. When someone refuses him, something in him shifts. He becomes about the winning, not about the property anymore." Emily was very quiet processing this. "Gerald," she said, "when it was happening to you, did you ever find anything that could prove it was him? Anything at all?" The silence this time was longer. "There was a man," Gerald said finally, "a consultant that Blackwell used. I never got his name. But at one point, close to the end, when I was barely holding on, someone who worked at the county permit office told me that a man had come in asking questions about my business license, asking if there were any violations that could be cited, any outstanding issues, probing for weaknesses." He paused. The permit office worker described him. Young, early 30s, dark hair, drove a black SUV, not Blackwell himself. Someone who did his groundwork for him. Emily wrote this down. "Did you ever try to find out who he was?" "I was running on empty by then," Gerald said quietly. "I didn't have the resources or the energy. I sold the store 3 weeks later." Another pause. "I'm sorry I couldn't do more." "You're talking to me right now," Emily said. "That's something." After she hung up, she sat with the notebook open and looked at what she had written. A consultant, young, dark hair, black SUV. It wasn't much, but it was something new. Something that had not been in Mitchell's files because Gerald had never told anyone officially. She called Mitchell and told him. He was quiet for a moment. "That's good," he said. "That's actually useful. I'll see what I can find." "What do you need from me?" "Eyes open," he said. "Anyone you see around the garage that doesn't fit anyone you don't recognize who seems to be paying attention to the business, let me know immediately." "All right." "And Emily," a pause, "be careful. What they did to the equipment was a message. That kind of escalation doesn't usually stop there." She didn't say anything. "You hear me," Mitchell said. "I hear you," she said. "I'll be careful." She hung up. She looked at the notebook again. Then she went back to work, because the work was the thing that kept her sane, and sanity was the most important tool she had right now. 4 days later, Donna Cahill walked into the garage. Donna ran the hardware store 2 blocks down, had run it for 12 years since she bought it from an older couple who were retiring and moving to Arizona. She was in her late 50s, broad-shouldered, with a directness of manner that Emily had always liked. They had been friends in the comfortable, uncomplicated way of 2 women who ran businesses in the same small town and understood what that meant. Donna came in without calling first, which was unusual. And she had an expression on her face that Emily recognized immediately as the expression of someone who has decided to tell you something they have been sitting on. I need to talk to you, Donna said. Talk, Emily said. She set down her torque wrench. Donna looked around the garage at the damaged equipment, some of which Emily had replaced, some of which she hadn't been able to yet, and something crossed her face. Anger, Emily thought. Real anger, the kind that came from actually caring about something. I had a visitor last week, Donna said. A man I didn't know, business type, came into the store. He wasn't there to buy anything. He spent about 20 minutes asking me questions about you, about the garage, about whether you were stable, whether the business was solid, whether he'd heard anything concerning. She stopped. I told him to leave my store. Emily felt something cold move through her. Did he give you a name? He gave me a card. Donna pulled it from her pocket and held it out. It was a generic business card, a name Emily didn't recognize, a title that said, Regional Business Consultant, a phone number. Ryan Mitchell needs to see this, Emily said. I figured. Donna didn't retract the card, but she held Emily's gaze. Emily, how bad is it? Emily thought about being reassuring. She thought about all the automatic responses. I'm fine, it's being handled. Don't worry. And she looked at Donna, who had been her friend for 4 years and who had walked in here out of genuine concern, and she decided those responses were not what the moment required. It's bad, she said simply. It's a coordinated campaign to force me to sell. He's been doing it to businesses in other areas too. Detective Mitchell is building a case, but it takes time. She held Donna's eyes. I'm not selling. I want you to know that. Whatever happens, that's not changing. Donna looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded. What can I do? Right now, tell anyone who asks that you've been in this garage and seen the work, and there's nothing wrong here. The rumors are what's hurting me most with regular customers. Every person who can counter them helps. I can do that, Donna said. I will do that. She looked at the business card in her hand, then handed it to Emily. And I'll tell Mitchell whatever he needs. After Donna left, Emily stood holding the business card. A regional business consultant. The kind of title that meant nothing and could cover everything. She thought about what Gerald Ferris had told her. Young man, dark hair, black SUV. She looked at the card. She called Mitchell. He ran the number on the card within the hour and called her back. The number was registered to a shell company, a small LLC with a registered address in Helena that when he checked turned out to be a mail forwarding service. The name on the card was real, but it belonged to a person with no digital footprint, no professional history, no social media, no presence anywhere that would tell you what he actually did for a living. Ghost Mitchell said, these things are set up for exactly this purpose. The company exists on paper, the identity is clean, and the work is completely untraceable back to whoever is paying for it. Can you break through it? Not quickly, maybe not at all through official channels. A pause. But I know someone who's good at finding things that want to stay hidden. Let me make a call. Ryan, she kept her voice steady, are we moving too slowly? We're moving as fast as we can without making mistakes, he said. If we tip our hand too early, if Blackwell knows we're building a case, everything disappears. These people know how to make evidence vanish. She pressed her fingers to her temple. All right, she said. All right. She hung up. She was standing in the middle of the garage trying to decide what to do next when she heard the motorcycle. She knew the sound of it, now had known it since the first morning, the deep, unhurried rumble of the Indian Scout that Jack Callahan had been putting through its paces since she fixed the ignition circuit. She heard it come off the road into the parking area, heard the engine cut. Jack came through the door. He looked at her face immediately and his eyes sharpened. Tell me, he said. She told him. All of it. Donna's visitor, the ghost company. Mitchell slow-billed the call with Gerald Ferris, the 4 more customer cancellations that had come in since she last spoke to Jack. She talked for 10 minutes without stopping, and Jack stood against the workbench with his arms crossed and listened without interrupting the same way he had listened in their first real conversation. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. The consultant, he said, the one Ferris described, and the one who visited your friend's store, same person you think? Mitchell thinks so too. Does Mitchell have a name for him yet? No, Jack was quiet again, thinking through something she couldn't see. I might be able to find out, he said. She looked at him. How? He held her gaze. I know people, he said. People who've been around long enough to know how men like Blackwell operate. Some of those people remember things that never made it into official records. A pause. Let me ask some questions. Jack, she stopped, started again. I need to know what I'm dealing with here. With you, I mean. If you get involved in this, really involved, what does that mean? What does that look like? He looked at her for a long moment, and she appreciated that he didn't answer immediately. He gave the question the weight it deserved. It means that a man who has a debt to your family pays it, he said simply. That's what it looks like. Nothing more dramatic than that. The people you'd be asking, she said carefully, they're connected to, she stopped. To what I'm connected to, he said without flinching from it. Yes, she had seen the patches on his vest the first morning. She had not asked about them directly because she had not wanted to, because the information felt large and she'd been trying to process everything else. But she had read the patches. She knew what they said. She knew what the organization was. I'm not looking for violence, she said directly and clearly. I want you to understand that. That's not what I want. That's not what I'm offering, he said with equal directness. I'm offering information, eyes in places that official law enforcement can't reach. Knowledge about how men like Blackwell operate and who they use. He met her eyes. I have never in my life raised a hand against someone who didn't earn it. That is not who I am, and it is not what I'm suggesting here. She believed him. She couldn't entirely explain why, except that her father's tool chest had a name scratched into the metal. By an honest man, and honest men sometimes came in forms you weren't expecting. All right, she said. All right, he said. He left 40 minutes later. She watched the scout pull out onto the road and disappear. Then she turned around and found Marcus standing in the door to the back office with a look on his face that was somewhere between confused and awed. Was that who I think it was? Marcus said. Depends on who you think he is, Emily said. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it. Then, I grew up around here, Emily. I know who rides that kind of bike with those kinds of patches. Then yes, Emily said. That's who he is. Is that a problem for you? Marcus thought about it for a second. No, he said. Actually, no. It's kind of the opposite of a problem. Good, Emily said. Then let's get back to work. The twist happened on a Tuesday. It was 2 weeks after Jack had said he would ask questions, and Emily had settled into the grinding rhythm of the siege open early, work hard document. Everything call Mitchell. Every 2 days, count the losses, refuse to show them on her face. 5 more customers had drifted away. Parts supply had stabilized slightly, but 2 of the suppliers she'd been counting on for the Bel Air restoration were still on indefinite delay. The business insurance had been reclassified at a higher risk tier, which meant her premiums had jumped by 40%, which was not something she had budgeted for. The math was getting difficult. Not impossible, not yet, but difficult in the way that difficult things became slowly. Something else if you didn't change the equation. She was on the phone with Daniel Park that Tuesday morning, going through the financials, when Marcus appeared in the doorway with an expression that stopped her mid-sentence. What? She said, one hand covering the phone. There's someone outside, he said. Emily, there's a lot of someones. She told Daniel she'd call him back. She walked out into the parking area and stopped. There were 11 motorcycles. Not in a row, not arranged to make a statement, just parked the way bikes get parked when a group rides together and stops. The riders were standing around them or leaning against them, talking in small groups. They were men of varying ages, some her father's age, some younger most, with the particular ease of people who had been moving through the world on their own terms for a very long time. Jack was standing at the edge of the group, separate from the others, in the way a person stands when they want to let you take in something at your own speed. Emily walked toward him. What is this? She said quietly. People who knew your father, Jack said, directly or by reputation. Thomas Walker's name carried a long way in this community, Emily. You probably didn't know that. He paused. I started asking questions 2 weeks ago. Word got around differently than I expected. These men came on their own. She looked at the group. An older man, heavy-set, gray-bearded, caught her eye and nodded. A younger man near the back was looking at the garage with an expression that was attentive and serious. They heard you were in trouble, Jack said. They came to ask what they could do. Emily stood there and breathed through the complicated emotion that was moving through her chest. She was not a woman who cried easily. Her father hadn't been a man who cried easily either, and she had come by the trait honestly, but something in this moment was pressing against something that she was working to hold. They can't fix the business problems, she said. Her voice was steady. The supplier delays the insurance the customers who left. No, Jack agreed. They can't fix those directly. A pause. But they have trucks that need work. They have bikes that need maintenance. They have friends and family in this part of Montana who have vehicles and need a mechanic they can trust. He held her gaze. And they talk to people, Emily. All of them do, every day, in every town between here and the Idaho border. Another pause. Reputation is how your father built this business. Reputation is how it's being attacked. Reputation is also how it gets defended. She understood then. This was not an offer of violence. It was not a threat. It was the simplest thing in the world and also one of the most powerful. It was a group of people saying we are here and we see what's happening and we're going to tell the truth about it to everyone we know. She looked at the group for another long moment. Then she walked toward them. The gray-bearded man stepped forward. Name's Vince, he said. Rode with your father's friend Frank back in the day. Frank told me about Thomas Walker about 15 years ago. Said he was the only mechanic between Missoula and Great Falls who could be trusted absolutely. He held out his hand. I've got a truck with a transmission that needs looking at. If you've got room. I've got room, Emily said. She shook his hand. She spent the next 2 hours talking to every man there. Not all of them had vehicles that needed work right now. Some of them were there for simpler reasons, the way people show up sometimes when they feel like someone needs to not be alone. She made appointments for 7 vehicles. She took down 4 phone numbers of people who said they would send their family and friends her way. It was not a solution to everything. She was clear-eyed about that, but it was something. It was the first thing that had moved in her direction since this started. Mitchell called that evening. I have a name, he said, and his voice was carefully controlled in the way voices get when the information is significant. The consultant, the one who's been doing Blackwell's groundwork. She gripped the phone. Who? His name is Derek Solt, 34 years old, based out of Bozeman. Officially, he's a business development consultant, and his client list is clean enough that nothing flags immediately. But I talked to a contact in the Whitefish area who worked on the Ferris case informally, and Ferris's description matches Solt exactly. A pause. There's more. Solt worked for Blackwell's development company 4 years ago, officially as a contracted analyst. He left officially about 2 years ago. But there are financial transactions between a holding company Solt registered in Nevada and one of Blackwell's subsidiary LLCs that continued after that. Money moved 3 times in the last 8 months. Emily sat very still. That's a connection, she said. It's a connection, Mitchell agreed. It's not proof of what he was paid to do, but it puts them together financially during the period when at least some of this started. Can you use it? Right now it's background, but it's the piece I've been missing, a documentable link between Blackwell and someone who was doing things in his interest. His voice shifted slightly. Emily, I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me, okay? The motorcycles that came by your garage this morning, he said. I heard about it. I'm not asking you to detail your conversations or your relationships. I'm asking you directly, is anything happening outside my knowledge that I should know about, if only to protect you? She was quiet for a moment. Then no, she said. Nothing illegal, nothing violent, nothing you'd need to know about in your professional capacity. She paused. Information is being gathered and shared. That's the only way I can describe it. Information, Mitchell repeated without inflection. Yes, another pause. All right, he said. I'm going to trust that. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me, he said. Just be careful, because if Blackwell finds out that people are gathering information about his operation and his methods, the pressure on you is going to increase. It won't get easier before it gets harder. She had already known that. She had known it since the morning she found her father's tool chest pried open. Ryan, she said, did you ever find out if he's planning to escalate further more than the break-in? The silence that followed told her the answer before he spoke. We don't know, he said. That's the truth. We don't know what he's capable of when he decides the normal playbook isn't working. He paused. Stay at the garage as little as possible after dark. If you need to stay late, have someone with you. And call me any hour, any time if something feels wrong. Define wrong, she said. Trust your instincts, he said. Your instincts have been right about everything so far. She hung up and sat in her father's chair for a long moment. 11 motorcycles in her parking lot that morning. A financial link between Blackwell and his consultant. Gerald Ferris's testimony, which Mitchell could now potentially use to establish pattern. the names in her notebook growing into something that looked less like a list of problems and more like a map. She thought about what Jack had said on the first day. Truth always comes out, always has. She wanted to believe that. She did believe it in the part of her that was her father's daughter and had grown up watching Thomas Walker live by principles that were not convenient or profitable, but were simply true. But truth taking its time did not pay the 40% insurance increase. Truth coming out eventually did not bring back the customers who had stopped returning calls. Truth was a destination, and between here and there was a road that was getting harder to walk. She opened the notebook to the financial column. She looked at the numbers with the particular focus of a woman who had been doing this for 3 years and knew exactly where the margin was. She had 2 months, maybe 3 if she was very careful, and the new work from Vince and the others came through consistently. 2 months to make this work. She closed the notebook. She went back out to the garage floor and looked at the Bel Air sitting patient and half finished in the bay, waiting for parts that were somewhere in a supply chain that someone had deliberately snarled. She looked at it the way her father would have looked at it, not with frustration, not with defeat, but with the steady assessment of a craftsman who understood that some things took longer than you planned for, and you had to hold your patience like a tool. She picked up a clean rag and carefully, deliberately polished the chrome around the rear taillight that she had already finished. It caught the garage light and threw it back bright and clean. She had 2 months. 2 months was enough. It had later. And it did not come from Mitchell. It came from Jack. He walked into the garage at 3:30 with the particular look of a man who has learned something important and has been deciding on the way over how to say it. Emily read his face the way she read an engine. The signals were different, but the skill was the same. "Tell me," she said before he could sit down. He told her. Solt had been making inquiries about the garage's county permits, the same move that the permit office worker in Whitefish had described Solt making before he destroyed Gerald Ferris's business. He had been talking to a contact at the Red Valley County office, asking questions about outstanding violations, anything that could be cited, probing for weaknesses exactly the way Gerald had described. But this time, the person he had talked to had told someone else. "Who?" Emily said. "Ed Cahill," Jack said. "Donna's husband. He works part-time at the county office." Solt didn't know who he was talking to. Emily stared at him. "Ed works for the county. 2 days a week," Jack said. "Scheduling, administrative." He met her eyes. Solt had a 20-minute conversation with Ed about this garage, about whether there were any permit issues that could be cited, about what it would take to trigger a formal inspection. He was fishing, and Ed recognized your name, Emily. He went home and told Donna, and Donna called me because she had my number from when I had work done on my truck here. Emily stood very still. "Ed will talk to Mitchell," Jack said. "He's willing to give a full statement. He has Solt's business card. He remembers the conversation in detail." A statement, a documented conversation. Solt on record talking to a county employee about probing for weaknesses in a specific business, a business that Solt's employer had been trying to acquire. It wasn't everything. It wasn't the smoking gun that ended this cleanly and permanently. But it was the clearest, most direct piece of evidence they had. It was the mistake Mitchell had been waiting for. She picked up her phone and called Mitchell before another second passed. He answered on the first ring. She told him everything. When she finished, the silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. "Tell Donna to have Ed call me tonight," he said. "I don't care what time." "I will, Emily." His voice was different now, still controlled, still steady, but with something underneath it that she recognized as carefully managed momentum. "This is real. This is usable. I need you to stay calm and stay quiet about this. Don't tell anyone. You don't absolutely have to tell, because the moment Solt knows we have this, it disappears." "I understand." "We're not done," he said, "but we're not losing anymore." She hung up. She stood in the middle of the garage with the phone in her hand and her heart moving fast and her face very still, because she had learned long ago that the moment when things started to shift was not the moment you celebrated. You held it. You stayed steady. You kept the garage open, and you kept working, and you did not let anyone, not Blackwell, not his ghost consultant, not the fear that still lived in the back of her chest like a bruise that wouldn't quite heal you, did not let anyone see you falter. She looked at the Bel Air. She looked at her father's tool chest. She picked up her wrench. She had work to do. Ed Cahill's statement took 2 hours to record. Mitchell sat with him at the kitchen table in the Cahill house on Saturday morning while Donna made coffee and then found reasons to stay in the other room because her husband needed to do this without an audience. Ed was a quiet man, the kind of quiet that came from spending most of his life around someone as direct as Donna, where the available conversational space had largely been claimed, and he had learned to be comfortable in what remained. But he was precise. He remembered dates. He remembered the exact questions Solt had asked, the exact way they had been framed, the specific language around permit violations and inspection triggers, and whether there were any outstanding issues that a concerned party might bring to the county's attention. Mitchell recorded everything. He took the business card. He photographed it. He asked Ed the same questions 3 times in different orders, the way experienced investigators do when they want to make sure the story holds. Not because he doubted Ed, but because the story needed to hold in a room where someone would absolutely try to break it. It held every time. Emily got the call at 7 that evening. Mitchell's voice was measured the way it always was, but she had learned to read the frequencies underneath the control, and what she heard underneath was something close to satisfaction. Ed's statement is solid, he said. More than solid. He's a county employee with no connection to you professionally, no reason to fabricate anything, and a documented interaction with a man who can be financially linked to Blackwell. That's the pattern establishing itself. That's the difference between a series of unfortunate events and a coordinated campaign. What happens now, she said. Now I take this to the county prosecutor and have a conversation I've been waiting to have. A pause. I need you to keep doing exactly what you're doing. Nothing changes on your end. You open the garage, you work, you document. Any new pressure, anything at all, you call me. She said she would. She hung up. She sat in the back office for a long moment in the particular quiet of a Saturday evening when the garage was closed, which was the kind of quiet that had no engine noise in it and sometimes pressed on her in ways she didn't welcome. She thought about her father. She thought about what he would have said if he were sitting across from her right now in the chair she still thought of as his, even though she'd been sitting in it for 3 years. He would have said, keep working, don't celebrate until it's done. And maybe not even then, because there's always more work. She smiled at the empty chair. Then she got up and turned off the lights. Monday came in hard. She found out at 9 in the morning from Marcus, who had heard it from someone at the gas station, that Red Valley Auto, the shop 2 blocks down, the one Pete Garrison had taken his truck to when the rumor started, had begun running a promotion. Half-price oil changes, discounted tune-ups, a coupon in the local paper. The timing was notable. The timing was not an accident. He's trying to pick up the customers he scared away from you, Marcus said. He was trying to sound analytical about it, but the set of his jaw gave him away. He was 22 and he was angry, and Emily understood that anger because she was managing the same thing in herself with considerably more years of practice. He probably made them an offer too, she said, the owner of Red Valley Auto. Marcus frowned. An offer to cooperate. An offer to benefit from what's happening to us. She said it without heat because heat was not useful right now. He doesn't just apply pressure, Marcus. He also provides alternatives. People who are willing to benefit from the pressure become invested in the outcome. She paused. It's thorough. I'll give him that. Marcus stared at her. How are you this calm? I'm not calm, she said. I'm controlled. There's a difference. She picked up her clipboard. What's on the schedule today? 3 vehicles. 2 of them were from Vince's network, a pickup belonging to a man named Charlie Briggs who had ridden with Vince for 20 years, and a car belonging to Charlie's daughter, who was a nurse at the regional clinic and had been driving on tires that were 2 seasons past their safe replacement point. The third was a walk-in, a woman Emily didn't know named Patricia Morse, who had driven 40 minutes from a town called Dearborn because she said when she called, someone had told her this was where you went for honest work. Emily didn't ask who had told her. She could guess. She was deep into Charlie Briggs's transmission at 11 when Jack arrived. He came in without announcement, which she had come to recognize as simply his manner. He didn't perform her arrival. He was either there or he wasn't. He set 2 cups of coffee on the workbench and waited for her to notice him, which she did almost immediately because she had, without quite planning, to develop a specific awareness of the particular way he moved through the garage. Unhurried, steady, like a person who had decided long ago that the world moved at a certain pace and he had made his peace with it. She rolled out from under the truck and sat up. Mitchell talked to the prosecutor, Jack asked. Friday, she said. He's waiting to hear. Jack nodded. He handed her the coffee. I heard about the Red Valley auto promotion. Fast, she said. Word travels fast when people are paying attention. He leaned against the workbench. How's the money? She appreciated that he asked directly. He had never dressed the hard questions in softer clothes, which was one of the things she had come to trust about him most. I have 6 weeks, she said. Maybe 7 if the new work holds. After that, I start making choices I don't want to make. He absorbed this without visible reaction. What would change the math? Finishing the Bel Air, she said immediately. It's a significant contract. The customer has been patient, but I can't finish it without the parts I'm still waiting on, and the parts I'm still waiting on are still somewhere. Delayed. I've called 3 times. She stopped. I think the delay on that specific order is deliberate. It's one component, one supplier, one part that I could get from another source if I could find it. What's the part? She told him, a specific carburetor rebuilt to original specification for a 1957 Chevy. The supplier she normally used had gone silent. 2 alternative suppliers she had contacted were back-ordered with no clear date. Jack was quiet for a moment. I know a man in Butte, he said, retired, spent 40 years rebuilding vintage American engines. If the part exists within 500 miles, he knows where it is. Emily looked at him. Will he help? He owes me a favor that's been sitting untouched for 11 years, Jack said. I'd say this is a reasonable use of it. She wanted to say something about not wanting to take more from him than she already had. She opened her mouth to say it. He looked at her with an expression that was patient and also quietly firm, the expression of a man who had anticipated exactly this response and had already decided what to do about it. Your father helped me, he said simply and finally in a tone that closed the argument before it started. Let this happen. She closed her mouth. She nodded. He made the call from the corner of the garage, turning slightly away to give the conversation privacy. She went back under the truck. She could hear him talking low and steady, and then a pause, and then something that might have been a short laugh, surprise she thought real. Then the conversation ended. He came back to the workbench. He has one, he said. Rebuilt correct spec, been sitting in his shop for 2 years waiting for the right project. He'll have it on a truck to Red Valley by Wednesday. Emily set down her wrench. She sat with that for a second. Wednesday, the Bel Air could be finished by the end of the week. The contract payment would come through. 6 weeks became something else. Jack, she said. Don't, he said, not unkindly. She almost smiled. She picked up her wrench. Wednesday, she said. Wednesday, he confirmed. She went back to work. The call from Mitchell came on Tuesday afternoon, and it changed everything. She was alone in the garage when her phone rang. Marcus had left at noon. Patricia Morse's car had gone out that morning. Charlie Briggs had picked up his truck and shaken her hand and told her he was sending his brother-in-law next week. She was finishing the last piece of scheduled work for the day, the kind of solitary late afternoon work she actually loved, just her and the engine, and the particular concentration that pushed everything else out. She almost didn't hear the phone. She caught it on the 4th ring. Emily. Mitchell's voice was different. She straightened up immediately because she heard it. Something had shifted, something significant, and it had shifted fast. Are you sitting down? No, talk to me. I need you to listen carefully, and I need you not to react until I'm finished. Ryan, she kept her voice very flat. Tell me, he told her. The prosecutor had reviewed Ed's statement and the financial link between Salt and Blackwell's subsidiary. She had found it compelling. But what had made her sit forward, according to Mitchell, was what she had found when she started pulling threads of her own. Because prosecutors, when they have a direction to pull, have access to things that law enforcement investigators don't always reach easily. Blackwell's development company had a lawsuit filed against it in Cascade County, 2 years old. A family that owned a commercial property near Great Falls, a small auto body shop, ironically had sued alleging exactly the same pattern: coordinated harassment, reputation, destruction, supply interference, a break-in that was never solved. The suit had been filed, and then 2 months later, it had been withdrawn. The family had sold the property. The suit was withdrawn because they ran out of money to fight, Mitchell said. The lawyer fees were too much. They sold and settled and signed a non-disclosure. He paused. But the suit was filed publicly before the withdrawal. The court documents are public record. And in those documents, Emily and the filings before the withdrawal, the family's lawyer named Derek Solt. The silence on her end lasted about 4 seconds. They named Solt, she said, by name, by physical description, with a documented incident involving a county employee in Cascade County who had a conversation with Solt about the family's business permits. A pause. The same conversation, the same method. 2 years earlier, different county. Emily sat down. She hadn't planned to, but her body made the decision without consulting her. She sat in her father's chair and put her hand flat on the desk and breathed. Pattern evidence, she said. Pattern evidence, Mitchell confirmed. The prosecutor is talking to the family's original lawyer this afternoon. If that lawyer will cooperate, if the family will come forward, even partially, even just to confirm the pattern. The NDA, Emily said. They signed a non-disclosure. Non-disclosures in civil settlements have limits when it comes to criminal investigations, Mitchell said carefully. The prosecutor is working through the specifics. But Emily, the direction has changed. We are no longer trying to build a case from scratch. We are connecting existing evidence to a pattern that has been documented before. Another pause, and this time she could hear something in him that she had not heard before, a controlled energy. The sound of someone who had been patient for weeks and could now feel the distance to the finish line. This is real. What I'm telling you is real. She pressed her hand harder against the desk. She was thinking about the family in Cascade County, a small auto body shop, a family who had fought and run out of money and signed their silence and sold their dream to make it stop. She was thinking about how close she was to being them. She was thinking about how she wasn't going to be them. What do I do? She said. Nothing different, Mitchell said. Not yet. You keep the garage open. You document everything. You do not tell anyone about this conversation except Jack Callahan, and only because I know he's involved in this and I need everyone on the same page. He paused. Can you do that? Yes, she said. Emily, his voice went quieter. This is going to come to a head. When it does, when Blackwell finds out we have this, he's going to make a move. A significant move. I don't know what form it takes, but men like him don't walk away quietly when they feel cornered. I want you to be ready for that. She thought about the break-in, about her father's tool chest pried open in the dark by people who were sending a message, about how she had stood in the wreckage and looked at the name scratched into the metal and made a decision that she had held every single day since. I've been ready, she said. She hung up. She sat there for another minute. Then she called Jack. He picked up on the second ring. She told him everything. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment that felt considered rather than shocked, like a man absorbing information that confirmed something he had already suspected but had not yet been able to see clearly. The Cascade County family, he said. Do you know their name? Mitchell didn't say. I'll find out, Jack said. She started to ask how, and then she didn't because she already knew the answer to that question, and asking it again felt unnecessary. Jack, she said instead. Mitchell said when Blackwell feels cornered, he'll make a move, a significant one. Yes, Jack said. What do you think that looks like? A pause, not hesitation, exactly deliberation. He can't hurt you physically without crossing a line that makes everything worse for him. He's too smart for that and too careful. A pause. But the garage itself, the property, the assets, he might try to accelerate the financial pressure. Something that creates a crisis in the next few weeks before the legal case solidifies. Another pause. Or he comes back in person and tries to reopen the conversation. Make a new offer from a position of supposed strength. Emily thought about the last time she had seen Richard Blackwell. The practiced smile, the business card set down on her workbench, like a calling card left by someone who expected to return. If he comes back, she said, what do I do? You let him talk, Jack said. You let him say everything he wants to say, and you say nothing you don't intend for him to hear eventually in a courtroom. She absorbed that, and if he escalates past talking, Jack's answer was immediate, and it was quiet, and it was the most certain thing that she had heard anyone say since this began. Then he won't be alone in the room with you. She understood what that meant. All right, she said. She hung up. She went back to the workbench. She had work that still needed doing, and work had always been the thing that held her steady when everything else was moving. The carburetor arrived Wednesday afternoon. Earlier than expected, the driver made it from Butte in better time than the roads usually allowed, And when he backed up to the garage and brought in the part, carefully packed in exactly the right materials, Emily unwrapped it with the kind of attention she gave to things that mattered. It was perfect, original spec rebuilt with the care of someone who understood what these engines meant, not just mechanically but historically, as objects that represented a specific moment in American craftsmanship that could not be replicated, only honored. She called the Bel Air's owner, a man named Frank Olson, who had been waiting with more patience than she had deserved, and told him she could have the car finished by Friday. Frank Olson made a sound that was part relief and part something more personal. "Emily," he said, "I want you to know I heard what's been going on. My brother told me. I want you to know that I told 3 people this week that Walker's is the only place in Montana I trust with that car. And I'm going to keep telling people." She thanked him. She hung up. She went back to the car. She worked on the Bel Air until midnight that night. She wasn't trying to punish herself. She was trying to finish the work that needed finishing. And the work required a certain sustained attention that didn't accommodate stopping every few hours. Marcus stayed until 9 and helped with the detail work, the things that required 2 sets of hands to do properly. When he left, she kept going. At 11:30, she stepped back and looked at the car. It was done. It was completely, exactly, beautifully done. Every component restored to original specification, every surface treated with the care that a '57 Chevy Bel Air deserved, every detail that Frank Olson had asked for accomplished, with the kind of workmanship that Thomas Walker had spent a career insisting on. She stood there for a long time. Then she went to her father's tool chest and opened the top drawer. She read the words she had already memorized by touch. Thomas Walker, Eden Valley MT, built with honest hands. "I know," she said quietly. To the empty garage, to the scratched words, to the man who had scratched them. "I know." She turned off the lights and walked out. Richard Blackwell came back on Thursday morning. She was standing at the workbench, reviewing the day's schedule when she heard the sound. Expensive shoes on concrete, exactly the same rhythm as the first time 8 weeks ago when this had all begun. She looked up. He looked different. Not dramatically, the suit was just as precise, the posture just as composed. But something around the edges of him had shifted. The practiced ease was still there, but underneath it, if you were paying close attention, was something tighter. The look of a man who had expected something to be finished by now and was recalibrating. He looked around the garage, at the Bel Air finished and gleaming, at the other vehicles in various states of work, at the equipment, some repaired, some new, none of it reflecting the crisis he had expected to find. "Ms. Walker," but he said. "Mr. Blackwell," she said. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he smiled, the same practiced smile as before, but thinner now, less certain of itself. "You're still here," he said. "I am," she said. "I admire the tenacity," he said. He walked a few steps in the way he had the first time, hands clasped behind his back, surveying. But this time the inventory was different. This time he was looking for signs of the collapse he had engineered and not finding them the way he had expected to. "I've been thinking about you, Emily. May I call you Emily?" She didn't answer that. She just waited. He reached into his jacket. He produced an envelope. "I have a new offer," he said, "considerably higher than my original number. Given everything that's happened, I think you'll find it more than fair." She didn't move toward the envelope. "Given everything that's happened," she repeated. "The market is volatile," he said smoothly. "Small businesses face challenges. I understand that your insurance situation has become complicated, and I understand there have been some supply issues and in the current environment. Mr. Blackwell," she said his name the same way she had the first time he had stood in this garage, flat, steady, with the weight behind it that came from knowing exactly what she was doing. "I want you to be very clear about something." He stopped. "I know what you've done," she said. "I know who Derek Solt is. I know what he did in Cascade County 2 years ago. I know what he's been doing in Red Valley for the past 8 weeks. And I know that the money that paid for it moves between your subsidiary and his Nevada LLC." The silence that came after this was complete and absolute. Something happened in Richard Blackwell's face that she had never seen there before. A crack in the composure, brief and quickly controlled but real. The involuntary response of a man hearing something he had believed he could never be made to hear. "I don't know what you think you and Detective Mitchell and the county prosecutor know everything I've just told you," she said. "And they know about the family in Cascade County And they have Ed Cahill's statement about the conversation at the county office. She looked at him steadily. So what I would like you to do, Mr. Blackwell, is take that envelope and leave this garage and not come back. Blackwell stood very still. The practiced composure had reassembled itself. He was too experienced to let it stay cracked. But it was different now. Reconfigured. The smile was gone, and what had replaced it was something colder and more real than anything she had seen from him before. You have no idea what you're doing, he said quietly. I have every idea, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. The calculation behind his eyes was visible now, not hidden by performance, just running, processing, assessing what he had walked into and what it meant. Then he turned and walked toward the door. At the doorway, he stopped. He turned back one more time. And for the first time since she had known him, Richard Blackwell had nothing to say. He left. She stood in the middle of her father's garage with her hands steady at her sides and her heart moving very fast and her face showing exactly nothing. Then she picked up her phone and called Mitchell. He was just here, she said when he answered. A silence. What happened? I told him what we know, she said. Another silence. Longer. Emily. He needed to know that we know, she said. He needed to understand that it's over. I was very careful about what I said. I didn't threaten him. I didn't make promises I can't keep. I told him facts and I asked him to leave. Mitchell breathed. Then how did he take it? He left, she said, without his envelope. A pause. All right, okay. His voice was tight, not entirely happy, but also she could hear it, not entirely surprised. This accelerates things on his end. You understand that. I know, she said. But Ryan, I needed him to know that we see him, that the invisibility is gone. She paused. He's been operating in the dark for months. I needed the lights on. Mitchell was quiet for a moment. Is Jack with you? She looked toward the door. Jack's motorcycle had pulled into the parking area 20 minutes before Blackwell arrived. Jack himself was standing just outside the garage door, leaning against the wall close enough to be present and far enough to have given her the room to handle it the way she needed to handle it. Yes, she said. Jack is here. Good, Mitchell said. Don't be alone, not today. She hung up. She walked to the garage door. She looked at Jack, who was looking back at her with the steady, unreadable expression of a man who had already figured out most of what had just happened. You heard, she said. Enough, he said. She leaned against the door frame beside him. For a moment, neither of them said anything. She could feel the cold coming off the morning air outside, the particular late-season cold of Montana that was more honest than aggressive. It didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was. Was that smart? She asked. Not to him specifically, to the air, to herself, to her father's name scratched into the metal inside. Jack considered it for a moment. Was it true? He said, every word. Then it was necessary, he said. Whether it was smart depends on what he does next. She nodded. She straightened up. What does he do next? She said. Jack turned and looked at her. He tries to end this fast, he said, before the legal case gets any further, before more people see the pattern. He held her eyes. He's going to come at you harder than he has before. One more push. Everything he has. She let that settle. Then we'd better be ready, she said. We are, Jack said. She believed him. She was not sure entirely why she believed him, except that he had given her no reason not to. And in her experience, in her father's experience, in the experience of everyone she had ever trusted, that was exactly how trust worked. Slowly, honestly. One kept word at a time. She walked back into the garage. She had work to do. Mitchell called at 7 the next morning, and the first thing he said was, something happened last night. Emily was already at the garage. She had been there since 5, not because there was urgent work, but because she had not been able to sleep, and the garage was the only place that made the sleeplessness feel purposeful instead of frightening. She was holding her coffee cup with both hands when the phone rang, and she heard his voice, and she set the cup down very carefully on the workbench before she answered. Tell me, she said. Derek Solt filed a change of address with the Nevada LLC last night. Digital filing timestamped 11:47 p.m. A pause. He's moving assets. The LLC that received payments from Blackwell's subsidiary, he's restructuring it, which means he knows we have the financial connection, and he's trying to put distance between himself and the money trail before it matters in a legal context. Emily stood very still. Blackwell told him. Within hours of leaving your garage, Mitchell said. Yes. Is it too late? Can you still use the financial link? The original transactions are already documented. We have them. He can't erase what's already in our possession, but he might be trying to muddy the current picture, make it harder to prove ongoing coordination. A pause. Emily, this is actually useful information. It tells us exactly how scared they are. People don't scramble to restructure shell companies in the middle of the night when they think they're winning. She absorbed that. What do we do? The prosecutor is filing a formal request today for Blackwell's company financial records going back 3 years. That triggers a process that he can't stop and can't hide from. Once that request is in, the clock is running on his side, and it's running fast. Mitchell's voice was tight with controlled urgency. But I need to ask you something. When you talked to Blackwell yesterday, you mentioned the Cascade County family. Did you use that term specifically? I said Cascade County, she confirmed. And I said 2 years ago. A silence. Then he knows we've connected the cases, which means he knows the family is potentially relevant, which means he might contact them. Emily felt something cold move through her. He'd try to pressure them again after everything. He'd try to remind them of the NDA, Mitchell said. Make them afraid to cooperate. A pause. I need to get to them first. Today. This morning. Do you have a name? I have a name, he said. And then it's Reyes, Carlos and Marie Reyes. They ran an auto body shop outside of Belt. They have a daughter in Great Falls. He stopped. The daughter's name is Sophia. She's the one who found a lawyer and filed the original suit before the money ran out and they had to withdraw. His voice went quieter. She's 28 years old, Emily. She was 26 when she tried to fight him and couldn't. Emily thought about that for a moment. 26 years old, fighting Richard Blackwell with her parents' dream on the line and losing. Not because she was wrong, not because the law failed to exist, but because these things cost money and money ran out. And when money ran out, silence became the only affordable option. Go find them, Emily said, please. I'm already in my car, he said. He hung up. She put the phone in her pocket. She stood in the garage and breathed. Then she called Jack. Jack arrived within the hour, and she told him everything while standing at the workbench with her hands wrapped around her second cup of coffee that she wasn't really tasting. He listened the same way he always listened, completely without interrupting, without performing any reaction until she was finished. When she stopped talking, he said, the Reyes family, do you know if they're still in the area? Mitchell said the daughter is in Great Falls. He's going there now. Jack nodded slowly. Sophia Reyes, he said, and something in his voice made Emily look at him more directly. You know her, she said. It was quiet for a moment. I know of her, he said, through the same network that brought me here. Word travels about people who try to fight and get crushed. People remember. He paused. She's been carrying what happened to her family for 2 years. That kind of weight doesn't go away. Emily looked at him. Jack, is there anyone in your network who has contact with her? He met her eyes. There might be. If there is, she said carefully, and if that person can reach her before Blackwell does, it might matter. It might matter a great deal. He already had his phone out. He stepped to the corner of the garage, the same corner he always used, and made a call that lasted 4 minutes. When he came back, his expression told her what she needed to know before he said a word. Someone's calling her right now, he said. Emily breathed. Thank you. Don't thank me, he said, exactly the same words he always said. She had stopped arguing with Aaron. She went back to work. She had 2 vehicles scheduled for the morning, and she was going to do them properly and completely, because the garage being open and functioning was still the most important statement she could make, and she was not going to let one morning's fear change that. She was 40 minutes into the first job when Marcus arrived, hung up his jacket, and stood in the office doorway with an expression that she had learned to read as the forerunner of complicated news. What? She said, not looking up from the engine. There's a guy outside, Marcus said. He's been sitting in a silver sedan in the parking lot for about 20 minutes. He's not coming in. He's just sitting there. Emily straightened up slowly. What does he look like? 30s. Dark hair. I can't see clearly enough to dark hair, she repeated. Marcus caught the significance of that immediately. His face changed. You think it's Solt? Stay inside, she said. She took out her phone and called Mitchell. It went to voicemail. He was in Great Falls, probably in a conversation he couldn't interrupt. She texted him, silver sedan in parking lot. Dark hair. could be sold, address. Then she called Deputy Torres, who was the most available local law enforcement she had. Torres answered immediately. She explained the situation in 2 sentences. He said he would drive by within 10 minutes. She did not go outside. She stood inside the garage doorway where she could see the lot without being exposed, and she watched the silver sedan. She could not see the driver clearly from this angle, just a shape, the outline of someone sitting watching. Jack appeared beside her without a sound. He looked at the sedan. "Don't go out there," she said. "I know," he said. They stood there together and waited. 3 minutes later, the sedan started and pulled out of the lot, slowly, no urgency, the studied casualness of someone who wanted her to know they had been there without giving her anything actionable. Torres pulled in 90 seconds after the sedan left. Emily met him outside and described the vehicle make, partial plate, direction of travel. Torres radioed it in. He looked at her with the expression of someone who was starting to understand the full shape of what was happening here. "He's watching you," Torres said. "I know," Emily said. "That's intimidation," he said. "That's an escalation." "I know that too," she said. "I need it documented." Torres documented it. He took her statement carefully and completely, and before he left, he stood by his vehicle and looked at her with something that went beyond professional obligation. "I grew up in Red Valley," he said. "My dad brought his truck to your father for 20 years. I just want you to know, whatever I can legally do to help, I'm doing it." She nodded. She held his gaze. "Thank you, Ray." After he left, she went back inside. Marcus was standing exactly where she had left him, arms crossed, jaw tight. "He's trying to scare you," Marcus said. "He's succeeding a little," she said honestly, because Marcus deserved honesty. "But that's different from stopping me." Marcus looked at her for a long moment with an expression she had never quite seen from him before, something more adult than his 22 years, usually carried something that came from watching a person hold their ground under genuine pressure and deciding what that meant about the kind of person they wanted to be. "What do you need me to do?" he said. "What you always do," she said. "Show up, work hard, don't let him take that from us." He nodded once. Then he put his jacket back on and went to the vehicle he was supposed to be working on. She picked up her wrench. Mitchell called back at 2 in the afternoon, and she knew within the first 2 seconds of his voice that something had changed. "I talked to Sophia Reyes," he said, "for 2.5 hours. Emily sat down. "And she's been waiting," Mitchell said, and his voice was different now, quieter with something underneath it that was part anger and part something that had no clean name. 2 years, Emily. She's been waiting for someone to call her who had something real to offer. She signed the NDA because they ran out of money and she had no choice, but she never stopped keeping records." A pause. "She kept everything. Every interaction was sold. Every timeline entry, photographs of the damage to their shop, financial records showing the exact pattern of supplier and customer interference. She kept all of it because she believed that someday someone would come back and the case would be real." Emily realized she had her hand pressed against her sternum, against something that was moving in her chest. "She'll cooperate," she said. "She already is," Mitchell said. "She's been on the phone with our prosecutor for the last 40 minutes. The NDA has a criminal investigation exception if what happened to her family constitutes criminal conduct, and the prosecutor believes it does. The NDA cannot legally prevent her from cooperating with law enforcement." His voice gained energy, the controlled forward movement of a case finding its footing. "And there's more. Sophia had a contact, a former employee of Blackwell's development company, who left 18 months ago and who apparently left with a very clear conscience and a very troubled mind about some of the methods she had witnessed." "A witness," Emily said. "Inside his company." "Former employee," Mitchell said carefully. "She's been debating whether to come forward for over a year. Sophia has been in contact with her. And when Sophia called her today and told her that there was a real investigation with a real prosecutor looking at real evidence, she said yes." Emily stood up. She couldn't sit anymore. "Ryan, how big is this?" "Big enough," he said. "This is no longer a single business harassment case. This is a pattern of conduct across multiple jurisdictions with corroborating witnesses, financial documentation, and a former insider." He paused. "I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to be very visible over the next 48 hours. Open the garage every morning, work all day, let people see you. I need Blackwell to believe that nothing has changed, that whatever pressure he applied with the sedan this morning is still working, that you're still just holding on." I need him not to know how far this has moved. She understood immediately. You need him calm, she said, not desperate. A desperate man does unpredictable things, Mitchell said. A man who thinks he's still winning makes mistakes. She thought about what Jack had said on the first morning when this had all felt enormous and impossible. People like that, they think they have already won. They get comfortable. All right, she said. Visible, normal, every day. Good. A pause. Emily, I want to be careful here because I don't make promises I can't keep. But I want to tell you that I think we're close. I genuinely think we're close. She held the phone after she hung up and felt something she had not permitted herself to feel in weeks. She had kept it locked away carefully because hope was the most dangerous tool in a long fight. It cost energy. It created expectation, and when it broke badly. She had chosen steadiness over hope because steadiness was reliable and hope was not. But now, standing in her father's garage with the afternoon light coming through the windows and the smell of grease and metal, and the particular clean smell of a recently finished engine surrounding her, she let herself feel it for exactly 30 seconds. Then she put it away. She called Jack. I was there in 20 minutes. She gave him everything Mitchell had told her, and when she finished, he sat with it for a moment in his particular way of sitting with information, not rushing to respond, not performing reaction, just absorbing it into whatever internal framework he had built over a lifetime of navigating things that were complicated. Sophia Reyes, he said finally, she's something. You knew she kept records, Emily said. I suspected, he said. People who fight that hard and lose, some of them break. Some of them go quiet. But some of them keep building the case in private because they can't stop needing it to matter. He looked at Emily directly. She needed what happened to her family to matter. Emily thought about that. It mattered, she said. It's going to matter. He nodded. Then the next 48 hours. Mitchell wants you visible. Yes. Then you're not going to be alone, he said. Not in this building, not in this parking lot, not at any point where Blackwell or Solt could make a decision about access. He said it simply without drama, not an offer, a statement of fact about what was going to happen. She started to say something about not wanting him to rearrange his life, and he stopped her with a look that was patient and completely immovable. Emily, he said, let this happen. She stopped. She nodded. The next 2 days were the strangest of the entire ordeal. On the surface, they looked almost normal. The garage opened, the work proceeding, Marcus showing up on schedule, customers coming and going. Vince brought his son's truck in for a brake job on the first morning and stayed 2 hours longer than he needed to drinking coffee and talking to Jack about roads they had both ridden at different times in their lives. Donna came by on the second afternoon with sandwiches in the particular energy of someone who has been wanting very badly to do something useful and has finally found an avenue. Underneath the surface, things were moving at a pace Emily could feel but not fully see. Mitchell called twice a day, brief calls, updates without details. The prosecutor was building. The former employee, her name was Karen. She was 41, she had worked in Blackwell's company for 6 years and had spent the last 18 months trying to forget what she knew was giving a deposition. Sophia Reyes had connected the financial documentation she had preserved with the documentation Mitchell had built, and the picture they formed together was clear, in the way that pictures became clear when there were enough data points. On the second evening, as Emily was locking up, Mitchell called with a single piece of information delivered in a voice that was very controlled. Blackwell's lawyer contacted the prosecutor's office this afternoon, he said, requesting a meeting. Emily stopped with her keys in her hand. That's what it looks like, Mitchell said. Yes. When? Tomorrow morning. A pause. Emily, this doesn't mean it's over. These meetings can go many directions, but it means they know. They fully understand the shape of what they're facing, and they reached out to the prosecutor. That is not the action of a man who believes he can win this fight. She stood in the dark parking lot with her keys in her hand and the cold Montana air moving around her in the garage behind her. Her father's name on the sign above the door, visible even in the low light from the street. Ryan, she said, whatever happens tomorrow, whatever they offer or propose or try to negotiate, I need you to know something. Tell me, he said. I want accountability, she said. Not just for what he did to me, for what he did to the Reyes family, for what he did to Gerald Ferris, for every business and every family he ran this playbook against. Her voice was steady and absolutely certain. I'm not interested in a quiet resolution. I'm not interested in a check in a signature. I want him to answer for it where it can be seen. A long pause. Then that's what the prosecutor wants too, Mitchell said. For the record, she breathed. Good, she said. Then we're aligned. The meeting happened on a Thursday morning at 9 a.m. in the prosecutor's office in the county building, and Emily was not in the room. She was in the garage exactly where Mitchell had told her to be, doing exactly what she had been doing, opening the building before sunrise, making coffee, starting the day's first work order, while Marcus arrived and the sounds of the garage doing what garages do filled the space around her. She had told herself she would not watch the clock. She watched the clock. At 11:17, Mitchell called. She picked up before the first ring finished. They came with an offer, he said. Settlement, significant financial compensation to you, to the Reyes family, to Ferris. Blackwell accepts a consent decree, formal legal constraints on his business practices, monitored for 5 years, no criminal charges filed. She said nothing. She waited. The prosecutor declined, Mitchell said. Something went through her that she could not name. It was not simple relief. It was more complex than that, more tangled. It was the feeling of having held something steady for a very long time and feeling the holding change shape. She declined, Emily repeated. She told them that the documented pattern of conduct across multiple jurisdictions with multiple victims coordinated by the same individuals does not qualify as something that a consent decree adequately addresses. She told them that the people who were harmed deserve more than a check. His voice was steady and warm and completely professional all at once. She told them she'd see them in court. Emily sat down. She was under no illusions about what happened next. Court was slow. Court was expensive. Court was a different kind of fight. But this was a fight that would happen in a place where the truth could be stated plainly and permanently, where Richard Blackwell would have to sit across from the evidence of what he had done and have it named for what it was in front of a judge and a record that could not be NDA'd away. What do I do now? She said. You keep the garage open, Mitchell said. The same as always. This is going to take time. I want to be honest about that, but the trajectory has changed, Emily. We are not losing anymore. She hung up. She sat for a moment. Then she walked to the office doorway and looked at Marcus, who was watching her from across the garage with his hands still waiting. We're still in it, she said, but we're not losing. He exhaled. It was a sound that carried more than 22 years of relief in it. Okay, he said. Okay, good. Then he picked up his tools and went back to work because that was what you did. She walked back into the garage. She went to her father's tool chest. She opened the top drawer. She read the words she had memorized with her hands and her eyes and something deeper than either. She needed to tell Jack. I was in the parking lot when she came out sitting on the Scout with his arms folded. Waiting the way he always waited, not impatiently, not performing patience, just present. He looked at her face and he read it the same way he read everything completely and accurately and without needing it spelled out. The prosecutor said no to the settlement, she said. He nodded slowly. She's taking it to court. He was quiet for a moment. How do you feel about that? She thought about Gerald Ferris and his hardware store. She thought about Sophia Reyes, 26 years old, building a case alone in an apartment somewhere because she needed what happened to her family to matter. She thought about Karen, 41 years old, carrying 6 years of things she had seen inside a company that ran on other people's destruction, waiting 18 months for a moment to put it down. I feel like it's right, she said. It's the right thing. He looked at her steadily. It is, he said. She looked at him. Jack. She said his name carefully, the way you said a word when you wanted to make sure you were saying it completely. I need you to know whatever happens from here and however long it takes what you did. Being here. The Reyes girl, the carburetor, the 11 motorcycles in my parking lot. She stopped. You didn't have to do any of it. I know, he said. Why did you? I was quiet for a long moment. Long enough that she thought he might not answer, that this was one of the questions he would hold rather than speak. Then, because your father held the door open for a man who had nowhere else to go, he said, and he charged him one price for the work. He looked at her directly and his voice was simple and completely without performance. That kind of thing shouldn't go unanswered. It never should. She held his gaze. She felt the weight of it, of what was passing between them, of what her father had done 25 years ago in this exact building bag with no knowledge of what it would eventually mean, of how far a single act of decent treatment could travel through time. He would have liked you, she said. Jack looked at the garage sign above the door. He looked at it for a moment. I know, he said quietly. I liked him too. She breathed. She straightened up. I'm going back to work, she said. I know, he said. She walked back into the garage. She picked up her wrench. She bent over the engine that needed her attention, and she did the work the way her father had taught her, with her hands and her head and her full presence, without reservation, without distraction, without the kind of halfway attention that produced halfway results. Outside, she could hear the Scout's engine, Jack not leaving, just running it, the deep, unhurried sound of a machine that had been cared for properly and showed it. She worked. The sound continued. The garage held them both. Owen. 3 days later, the local paper ran a story. Not a planted rumor, not a brief item about financial instability. A real story written by a journalist named Carol Yee, who had been following the investigation quietly for 2 weeks after getting a tip from a source she would not name, and who had put together with Mitchell's careful guidance a piece that named Richard Blackwell's development company named Derek Solt, described the pattern of conduct across 3 businesses in 2 counties, and quoted Sophia Reyes by name. Sophia had asked to be quoted. She had been very clear about that. The quote Carol Yee used was this: they made us sign a piece of paper saying we'd be quiet, but a piece of paper doesn't make what happened to my family disappear. Nothing makes that disappear. I want people to know what this man does and who he does it to. Emily read the article on her phone standing at the workbench at 6:30 in the morning before Marcus arrived. She read it 3 times, then she called Donna. Donna had already seen it. Donna had been awake since 5 a.m. and had already shared the article with 11 people, which Emily could tell from the fact that her phone was currently lighting up with texts from people she hadn't heard from in weeks. Pete Garrison called at 7:40. He sounded uncomfortable in the specific way of a man who knows he owes an apology and is trying to find the right shape for it. Emily, he said, I want to bring the truck in. Pete, I should have believed you, he said. I should have asked harder questions before I took it somewhere else. I know that. And I'm not asking you to pretend it didn't happen. I just want you to know that I know. A pause. Can I bring the truck in? She was quiet for a moment, not because she was undecided, but because she wanted the pause to mean something, to acknowledge that what he was saying was real, and that it mattered, and that she was treating it with the weight it deserved. Bring it in, she said. We'll take care of you. By noon, she had 6 new appointments. By 3 in the afternoon, she had 9. Marcus stood in the office doorway at 4:30 with his clipboard and an expression of pure, undisguised 22-year-old joy. We're booked, he said. We're actually booked. Emily looked at the appointment sheet. She looked at the names. Some she knew, some she didn't. Some were from Red Valley, some from farther out, people who had read the article or heard from someone who had, or been told by someone in a network that ran through the spaces between official channels and carried its own kind of news. She looked at it for a long time. Then we'd better get faster, she said. We've got work to do. The 9 appointments became 14 by the following Monday morning. Emily didn't have time to feel anything about that, which was probably the right way to experience it. Feeling things took energy she needed for the work, and the work was suddenly very real and very present and very demanding in the way that good problems are demanding, not the grinding weight of a siege, but the clean, purposeful pressure of a full schedule in a garage that was running the way her father had always intended it to run. Marcus came in early without being asked. He started arriving at 5:30, which was an hour before his shift. And when Emily pointed this out, he said simply that he had things to do and she should mind her own business, and she let it go because she recognized the feeling behind it. It was the same feeling she had, the sense that something worth protecting was finally actively being protected, and you wanted to put your whole body between it and anything that might threaten it again. Vince sent 3 more people from his network that first week. A man named Dale who needed a full engine rebuild on a 72 pickup. A woman named Rosa who had driven 90 minutes from outside Haver because someone had told her this was the place. And a young man, maybe 19, who brought in an old motorcycle with a blown gasket and almost no money, and who stood in the garage doorway with a particular combination of need and pride that Emily recognized as the posture of someone who was prepared to be turned away and was trying to look like it wouldn't hurt. She fixed the motorcycle. She charged him for parts only. She did not make a production of it. When the young man asked why, she said, "Because someone did that for people I care about once. Keep paying it forward." He left without saying much, but he came back 2 weeks later with his older brother's truck in a full appointment and a look on his face that said he had told the story to everyone he knew. That was how it worked. Emily understood that now more completely than she ever had before, not as a business strategy, not as a calculated move, but as a simple truth about the way things move through communities, when communities were working the way they were supposed to work. One act of decent treatment told to one person, repeated to another, carried forward across months and years, and sometimes decades, until it arrived back at the person who needed it most in a form they never could have predicted. Her father had known this. He had built a career on it without ever once calling it by a name. She was still thinking about this on a Tuesday morning when Mitchell called and said 4 words that she had to ask him to repeat. "They're pleading it out," he said again. She stopped moving. "What?" Blackwell's legal team contacted the prosecutor last night. They want to negotiate a plea. His voice was controlled in the way it always was, but there was something underneath the control that she had never heard there before, something that had no professional name, that was simply the sound of a person who had worked very hard for something and could finally feel it arriving. The insider testimony from Karen was the last piece. When Blackwell's team saw the full scope of what she could establish about internal knowledge and deliberate coordination, they pulled back. They can't put their client on the stand against that. Emily was standing in the middle of the garage holding her phone with both hands. "What does the plea mean?" she said. "Concretely, what does it mean for him?" "That's being negotiated right now," Mitchell said carefully. "The prosecutor is holding firm on criminal accountability, not just civil penalties. There will be charges, there will be a conviction of some kind. The specific contours are still being worked out." A pause. "But Emily, he is not going to walk away from this. He is not going to pay a check and sign a paper and go do this to someone else next year. That is not what's happening." She stood there with the September light coming through the garage windows and the smell of oil and metal around her, and her father's name on the sign outside. "The Reyes family," she said. "Gerald Ferris. Part of the negotiation includes restitution," Mitchell said. "Significant restitution. The prosecutor made it a condition." He paused again. "Emily, I want to say something to you, and I want to say it directly. This outcome, the fact that this is happening, the fact that we got here, it would not exist without what you did. Not just holding on when you should have broken, but bringing the pieces together, but telling Gerald Ferris's story to the prosecutor, but being visible enough and honest enough that people like Ed Cahill and Donna and Sophia Reyes felt like there was something real to come toward." She couldn't speak for a moment. "Thank you, Ryan," she said finally. "Don't thank me," he said, and she almost laughed because it was the same thing Jack always said, and she wondered if decent men all eventually arrived at the same words from different directions. "The garage is full of cars. Go fix them." She hung up. She looked at the garage around her, at the 4 vehicles in various stages of work at Marcus Elbow, deep in an engine across the bay, at the appointment board on the wall with its 14 names. She went to the office doorway. "Marcus?" He looked up. "The plea deal," she said. "It's happening." He stared at her. Then he put down his tools very carefully, the way you put down something you don't want to drop. And he pressed both his hands flat against the workbench, and he breathed. "Okay," he said. His voice was not entirely steady. "Okay. Okay," she said. "Back to work." He laughed, a short, real sound that bounced off the garage walls. Then he picked up his tools and went back to work. She did too. She called Jack at noon. He picked up on the second ring, and she told him, and there was a silence that lasted long enough to tell her that the information had landed somewhere real in him, somewhere that was not about strategy or next steps, but about something more personal and more complete. "Your father would know what this means," Jack said finally. "I know," she said. "Do you know what it means?" She thought about it honestly. "It means it worked," she said. "It means staying open worked, and documenting everything worked, and not being alone worked." She paused. "It means the truth came out." "It always does," he said, and he wasn't being sentimental about it. He was stating a fact that his life had taught him the same way a mechanic states a fact about how engines work. Not always fast, not always clean, but it comes out. Jack, she said, I want to see you before you leave. I know you're not staying in Red Valley permanently. I know this was never going to be permanent, but I want to see you. A pause. I'll come by Thursday, he said. There's one more thing I want to do first. What thing, she said. You'll see, he said. She would have pushed for more, but she had learned by now that Jack Callahan told you what he intended to tell you and no more. And the things he held back were always held back for reasons that turned out to be sound. She trusted in that. She had earned the right to trust that. Thursday, she said. Thursday, he confirmed. She hung up. She went back to the Bel Air's paperwork. Frank Olson had picked up the car the previous week with an expression of pure joy that Emily had held onto in the weeks since, storing it against harder moments, the way you stored good things. The invoice was closed, the check had cleared, and the amount had gone a long way toward restoring the financial margin that the siege had eaten through. Not all the way there were still the insurance premium increases, still the equipment replacement costs, still the months of reduced revenue that didn't simply vanish because the cause of them had been addressed. But the math had changed. She had stopped counting 6 weeks and started counting forward instead of backward, which was a different kind of counting entirely. She was reconciling the accounts when she heard a vehicle in the parking lot, and then footsteps, and then a knock on the office door frame. She looked up. Sophia Reyes was standing in the doorway. She was younger than Emily had pictured, which was strange because Emily knew the numbers, knew she was 28, had known it since Mitchell had told her. But she looked younger than 28 in the way that people look younger when they carry something heavy, and the weight of it is written on them more honestly than their age. She was dark-haired, slender, with the kind of eyes that had seen more than they wanted to and had decided to see it clearly anyway rather than look away. Emily stood up immediately. I hope it's okay that I came, Sophia said. I was in the area and I just wanted to see the place. She looked around the office out at the garage beyond. He talked about it differently, your father. In court documents and depositions, things get clinical. But this is real. Come in, Emily said. Sophia stepped inside. She looked at the old certifications on the wall. The photograph of Thomas Walker Emily kept on the corner of the desk. Thomas in his 40s, standing in this garage, holding a wrench with the easy confidence of a man who knew exactly where he was supposed to be. He looks like someone I would have trusted immediately, Sophia said. Most people did, Emily said. He had that quality. Sophia looked at the photograph for another moment. Then she looked at Emily with the directness of a person who had learned that there was no point in approaching things sideways. I want to say something to you, she said, and I need to say it properly. Emily waited. When everything happened to my family, Sophia said, and we had to sign the NDA and sell and go quiet, the thing that was hardest wasn't the money. It wasn't losing the shop. It was the feeling that it didn't matter, that no one would know, that he would go do this to someone else and no one would connect it. She stopped. And then you happened, and Mitchell happened, and it turned out someone kept every record and someone connected every piece, and it turned out it did matter. What happened to my family mattered. Her voice was steady, but not easy, the steadiness of someone who had practiced holding a hard thing without dropping it. I needed you to know that I know it was you, that I know none of this happens without you holding on when you should have given up. Emily looked at her for a moment. She felt the full weight of what was being said, not just the words, but everything underneath them. 2 years of Sophia Reyes sitting with records in a folder, waiting, hoping, needing it to matter. A family whose dream had been taken from them by a man who believed that money could simply erase whatever stood in its way. Your family holding on too, Emily said quietly, keeping the records, not letting it just dissolve into silence. That's what made it real when we got to court. Sophia held her gaze. Then she nodded once with the completeness of a person accepting something they have needed to accept for a long time. Can I see the garage? She said. Emily walked her through it. All of it, the bays, the equipment, the restored Bel Air's empty space where it had spent weeks waiting patiently to be finished. The tool chest. Emily did not mention the engraving when they stopped beside it, but she watched Sophia notice the bent drawer that still wasn't entirely right, and she watched Sophia understand without being told what that meant and how it had gotten that way. You fixed what they broke, Sophia said. I fixed what I could, Emily said. The rest is still bent, but it still works. Sophia looked at the drawer, at the metal that bore the marks of what had been done to it. That's a good way to put it, she said softly. The rest is still bent, but it still works. They stood there for a moment in the particular quiet of two women who had been through something real and had come out the other side of it, changed in ways they were still mapping. Then Emily said, "Stay for coffee." Sophia looked at her. Something in her face relaxed, not all the way, probably not all the way for a while yet, but enough to show what was underneath. "Yeah," she said. "Okay." Oh, yeah. Thursday came with the first real cold of the season, the kind of cold that arrived in Red Valley, not gradually but all at once, as if winter had simply decided to show up without announcing itself. And the mountains to the east went white overnight and stayed that way. Jack arrived at 9. He came in the same way he always came in, no announcement, no performance, the Scout's engine, cutting in the parking lot, and then his boots on the concrete. And then he was simply there, the same way he had been there from the first cold morning. He had rolled his bike into the garage and asked if she was Thomas Walker's daughter. He was carrying something under his arm. A box, not large, the kind of flat square box that tool parts came in sometimes, or documents, or things that had been kept somewhere carefully for a long time. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He set the box on the workbench. He opened it with the deliberate care of a man who had decided exactly how he wanted to do something and was doing it that way. Inside was a photograph. She recognized it before she fully understood what she was seeing, recognized the garage first, the layout of it, the particular angle from which it had been taken, recognized the time of year from the light. Then she recognized the man in it, younger by 25 years, but absolutely recognizable, standing at the workbench with a wrench in his hand and a look of concentrated attention on his face. Her father. And beside him, younger by 25 years, but equally recognizable, Jack. She looked up. "The morning he fixed my bike," Jack said. "I had a camera in my saddlebag. I asked if he minded. He said he didn't, as long as it didn't slow down the work." A pause. "I've carried that photograph for 25 years. It seemed like it was time for it to be here instead." Emily looked at the photograph for a long moment. Her father, young and focused and present, exactly the way she remembered him from her earliest memories of watching him work. Jack beside him, the two of them existing in the frame, the way two people exist when they have just met and don't yet know what the meeting will eventually mean. She picked it up carefully. "Jack," she said. "Don't," he said, not unkindly, the same word he always used. She almost said it anyway. Then she decided that the feeling she had didn't need words, that it existed fully in the act of holding the photograph and the fact that he had kept it for 25 years and had brought it here on this particular morning in the simplicity of what it meant. She set it on the desk. She looked at it beside the other photograph of her father, Thomas, in his 40s, the one that had always been there. Now there was a second one, Thomas younger, beside a man who had remembered him long enough to bring the memory back. "You're leaving," she said. "Today," he said. "I've got road to cover." She nodded. She had known it was coming, had known it since the first morning in some way, because Jack Callahan was not a person who stayed in one place indefinitely. He was a person who moved, who covered distance, who carried things from place to place and delivered them when they needed delivering. "Before you go," she said, "tell me something." He waited. "All of this," she said. "Everything. The 11 motorcycles in my parking lot, the carburetor from Butte, Sophia Reyes. What you said to people in your network that got them here and got them talking and got the right information to the right places." She looked at him. "Did you plan all of it from the beginning?" I was quiet for a moment. "I planned some of it," he said. The rest happened because people chose to be decent. I can't plan for that. I can only put myself where decency is possible and see what people do." He paused. "Your father put himself in a place where decency was possible 25 years ago. That's all he did. He fixed a bike and charged a fair price and stayed late because the work needed finishing." Another pause. "Look what it came back as." She looked at the photograph. She thought about all the things that had come back: the 11 riders, the carburetor, Sophia's records, Ed Cahill's careful memory of a conversation with a man who hadn't known who he was talking to, Donna's sandwiches, Mitchell's steady patience, Gerald Ferris's voice on the phone with its particular combination of sorrow and the specific anger of a man who never stopped needing it to matter. All of it tracing back, all of it connected, all of it moving toward this garage this morning, this photograph on this desk. "People think a legacy is what you leave behind," Jack said. "They're wrong." He looked at her with the directness he had always used, no performance, no softening. A legacy is what comes back when you need it most. She held his gaze. She felt the truth of it, not as a sentiment, but as a fact she could trace across 25 years with documentation and names and a notebook full of evidence. He knew that, she said. I don't think he knew it, but he did. The best ones always do, Jack said. He picked up his vest from where he'd set it on the stool. He put it on the same unhurried way he did everything. He looked around the garage one last time, not the way Richard Blackwell had looked at it, taking inventory, calculating value. The way a person looks at something they are glad exists in the world and want to hold in their memory. Keep it open, he said. I will, she said. Train the young ones right. I am. He looked at her. Something passed across his face, not quite a smile, but what lived behind a smile in a person who had learned to be careful with expression. Something warm and complete and final. Your father raised someone worth knowing, he said. Then he walked out. She heard the scout start that deep, unhurried rumble that she had come to know as well as any engine she had ever worked on. She heard it idle for a moment, settling into its rhythm. She heard it pull out of the lot and onto the road. She stood and listened until she couldn't hear it anymore. Then she turned around and looked at her garage. The plea agreement was finalized 6 weeks later. Richard Blackwell pleaded guilty to 2 counts of conspiracy to commit criminal harassment and 1 count of tortious interference with business relations across multiple jurisdictions. His company paid restitution to Emily, to the Reyes family, and to Gerald Ferris, amounts that did not give any of them back what they had lost because money never gave back what it claimed to replace, but amounts that acknowledged plainly and legally that what had been taken was real and that taking it had been wrong. Derek Solt took a separate plea. 3 counts. He lost his business consultant license. He lost the Nevada LLC. He lost 2 years, which he would spend somewhere that was not a small garage in a Montana town or a hardware store in Whitefish or an auto body shop near Belt. He lost the ability to simply move to the next target and run the same playbook against the next family who said no to the wrong person. Emily was not in the room when the pleas were entered. Mitchell had offered to make it possible for her to be there, and she had thought about it carefully and decided that she didn't need to be. Not because she didn't want accountability, she had asked for it clearly and she had gotten it, but because she had realized in the weeks between the negotiation and the finalization that the moment she actually needed had already happened. It had happened in her garage on the morning she had stood in the wreckage of her father's things and put her thumb over the engraving in the tool chest and decided she wasn't leaving. That was the moment. Everything else was consequence. The morning the plea was finalized, Mitchell called and told her, and she thanked him, and he said, "Don't thank me." And she smiled because she had come to love that particular stubbornness in him. The refusal to accept gratitude for doing what was right, as though doing right was somehow exceptional rather than simply required. She hung up. She walked into the garage. She looked at the appointment board with its 18 names, the most they had ever had at one time, more than the garage had carried even in her father's best years, a number that was going to require her to make decisions about expansion that she had been turning over in her mind for the past month. She was going to hire 2 people. She had already started thinking about who. One of them was the 19-year-old with the blown motorcycle gasket. She had talked to him twice since he came back with his brother's truck, and he had the right hands and the right attention and the right seriousness about the work, which was the only credential that had ever truly mattered to Thomas Walker or to her. Marcus was going to become full-time. He already was functionally. She was going to make it official and pay him what he was worth, which was considerably more than she had been able to pay him during the worst of it. She was going to finish the expansion that her father had always talked about, a third bay proper alignment equipment, the kind of diagnostic technology that would let her take on work she had been turning away because she didn't have the space or the tools. She had the money for it now, or would have within the quarter, and she had something more important. She had the customer base to justify it, built not on advertising or discounts or manufactured reputation, but on the oldest and most durable foundation a business could have. People who trusted her, because she had earned it, because her father had earned it before her, because trust passed forward, compounded in ways that no financial instrument could match. She stood in the middle of the garage and breathed. She thought about Thomas Walker, who had built this place with borrowed money in his own hands in 1981 and had run it for 37 years, without ever once believing that the measure of a business was anything other than whether the people who needed you could count on you to be there. She thought about Jack Callahan on a road somewhere between here and wherever he was going. The Scout's engine steady under him, carrying the particular freedom of a man who had paid every debt he owed and had nothing weighing on him but the open road. She thought about Sophia Reyes, who had been told by a legal document to be silent, and who had responded by keeping every record anyway, waiting 2 years for a moment that finally came. She thought about Gerald Ferris, who had answered the phone on the second ring and told her everything he knew, because sometimes the only thing a person who has been hurt can do for the next person is make sure the knowledge of it survives. She thought about Donna and Ed and Marcus and Vince and Dale and Rosa and the 19-year-old with the motorcycle and Pete Garrison and his truck and every person who had in one way or another stood between this garage and the thing that wanted to erase it. She thought about Richard Blackwell, who had walked into this building with his checkbook and his practiced smile and his belief that everything had a price and everyone had a number, and who had discovered too late in the most expensive way possible that he had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the thing he was trying to buy. He had tried to buy something that had never been for sale. Not the property was just land and concrete and equipment. What was not for sale was the 37 years of Thomas Walker, showing up early and staying late, and charging one price for the work and treating every person who walked through his door as someone worth treating, right? What was not for sale was the slow accumulating weight of that, the way it moved through a community across decades, touching person after person, creating connections that no amount of money could manufacture and no amount of pressure could sever. Richard Blackwell had brought money and leverage in a consultant who knew how to make businesses disappear. And he had lost, not because Emily Walker was exceptional, not because Jack Callahan was powerful, not because Mitchell was a brilliant investigator, or Sophia Reyes was a remarkable young woman, though all of those things were true. He had lost because Thomas Walker had stayed late on an ordinary evening 25 years ago to fix a stranger's motorcycle and had charged him a fair price and had meant it. That was the whole of it. That was everything. Emily Walker picked up her wrench. She looked at the first vehicle on the day's schedule. She went through the work and with her full attention, her full skill, her full presence, the way her father had taught her, the way she would teach the people who came after her, the way it would go on being done in this building for as long as she had anything to say about it. Walker's classic garage was open. It had always been open. It was never going to close.